Chapter 52. In the basement of the U.S. military training base. Howard, Fry, and Carter, the three of them were discussing on a world map with solemn faces. The departure point is the Hydra base under the Alps, and the autopilot's destination is New York. According to the normal flight speed of the out-of-control transport fighter and the time when the communication signal was cut off and disappeared, it can be calculated that the out-of-control fighter will eventually fall into this sea area. Howard, wearing a suit and tie, stood in front of the world map and drew a circle in the middle of the Atlantic with a black water pen, covering the internal area that should be investigated. But the center of the sea area where the out-of-control fighter is most likely to fall has been investigated by diving for the first time and no trace has been found. So it is inevitable to consider whether the out-of-control fighter deviated from the autopilot trajectory at that time, and the distribution of ocean currents and glaciers at that time. At this point, Howard's expression was heavy as he drew another larger circle in addition to the original circle to cover the map of the Atlantic Ocean. Fry in the lower seat shook his head and sighed. In this area of the sea, if a submarine is used to dive to the bottom of the sea for careful inspection every 10 meters, it will take 10 years to find the wreckage of the fighter. We can't give up. Carter's face was cold and she said firmly, "Those two people won't die so easily. They said they would definitely come back." Of course. Not only the military's submarines, but Stark Industries will also invest money and send professional divers to look for them in the sea. We won't give up until we find them. Howard nodded in agreement. After a moment of silence, he said the concerns in his heart. "I'm afraid that the out-of-control fighter will encounter the floating ice of the Shanghai Mountain. Now it's winter with multiple cold currents in the Atlantic. If the fallen fighter is frozen and sinks to the bottom of the sea, then even if we search for 100 years, we won't be able to find even a little bit of the fighter's parts." As soon as this was said, Fry and Carter in the basement were silent. In fact, after the fighter jet lost communication and fell from the sea, although the U.S. military had sent fighter jets and submarines to try their best to find them, they had long assumed that Steve and Cale had unfortunately died. Even if they found them, they would only bring back the remains of their bodies. However, even if it was confirmed that Steve and Cale were dead, the news would be suppressed by the military. After all, the loss of heroes who symbolized the country would have an unbearable impact during wartime. Just then, a soldier came down the stairs and said to Carter, "Agent Carter, someone sent something in from outside the base. He said it's for you." Carter was puzzled, but she still took the box from the soldier and asked, "Who is that person?" It was a little girl. She said she was Agent Carter's friend. The guards at the base didn't get to the bottom of it, so she ran away. We only sent the box in after confirming that it was safe. Thank you for your hard work. Carter nodded. After the soldier left, she put the box on the conference table. The cardboard box was neither big nor small, and it was sealed with tape. There was a short paragraph in English on it, "To Carter." Carter looked at the English handwriting with her beautiful eyes and was instantly stunned. Howard also felt that the atmosphere of the conference had been too heavy, so he couldn't help but tease, "Could this be a gift from a gentleman who admires you? Maybe it's intelligence. Let me help you open the box." Fry raised his hand and offered to help. After Carter agreed, he quickly took a pair of scissors and cut open the tape that sealed the box. The box was quickly opened by the tough guy. Under the dim yellow light, the contents of the box were revealed. It was a brand new folded red evening gown with a card with a rose on the front. Evening gown? Rose card? Fry was disappointed. He wasn't interested in women's items, so he immediately returned to his seat. Howard shrugged. "Looks like I was right. Beautiful Carter, do you need a bodyguard?" Carter didn't say anything. She walked forward and took the rose card from the box. After turning it over, the back of the card was still written in English. "Here is a solemn invitation to Miss Carter. On Friday, which is tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the evening, attend the Bird Club's singing and dancing party." "It's him. He's back," Carter said softly. "He's back?" Howard and Fry were slightly stunned. They looked at each other and then looked at her eagerly. "Who did you say is back?" A day passed and Friday night arrived as expected. In the big city near the base, the Bird Club was located in the center of the busiest street. The main entrance was carpeted, and the lights maintained a romantic neon glow. Beep beep. An extended luxury car stopped steadily in front of the main entrance of the club. As the driver, Howard got out of the car first and opened the door of the front passenger seat in a gentlemanly manner. Slender feet stepped out in high heels, followed by Carter, who was wearing a luxurious tube-top evening gown, who got out of the car. Her beautiful and glamorous face was especially charming after carefully dressing up. Her blonde hair was combed up, revealing her delicate collarbone. Further down, the tube-top evening gown cleverly showed off her perfect shoulders and the lines of her body. It was sexy and elegant at the same time. The red evening gown contrasted with her fair skin, making it even harder for people to look away. "Carter, you'll definitely be the most dazzling person at the party tonight." Howard sighed and waved his hand to urge her. "Hurry up and go in. Don't let them wait too long." After that, Howard sat back in the driver's seat and started the limousine, leaving Carter standing alone in front of the door. Carter took a deep breath, pressed her palms lightly on her chest and walked into the club nervously. Passing through the main entrance guarded by the formally dressed attendants, she walked all the way to the corridor. Inside it was not as lively as usual. On the contrary, except for the faint lights in the corridor to maintain visibility, the club's singing and dancing main hall was dark. There was no music, no lights, and no other guests, not even the club's attendants. Carter looked at the silent and dark hall in front of her. Just as she was about to call out, the lights around and above her suddenly lit up. Whoosh, the originally dark main hall was instantly lit up. Following that, soft tunes played by a variety of musical instruments sounded. It was as if they had rehearsed this countless times. Couples of gentlemen and ladies held hands as they poured into the main hall from all directions and danced elegantly to the music. "Is that you?" Carter could not help but ask. She looked around at the people dancing to the tune, as if trying to find a familiar figure among them. "No." A familiar low voice sounded from the musician playing the tune. Carter looked at the source of the sound and saw a handsome young man in a black tuxedo stand up from the piano seat. "It's me. You must be very disappointed." Cale spread out his hands and looked at Carter in the center of the main hall. Chapter 53. Tobert Club Main Hall. Classical lights hanging from the walls and ceiling illuminated the ballroom, and beautiful music flowed like water in the hall. Couples of gentlemen in suits and ladies in gowns danced, immersed in this entertainment place far away from the smoke of war. If the club here was not directly booked, and professional dancers were dressed as guests, Cale in a tuxedo would definitely cause a heated crowd and sensation when he appeared in the ballroom. Cale, the youngest major officer in the United States, was a hero who symbolized American strength and conquest. Since the Hydra organization was uprooted and eradicated, he once again became a legendary figure in the streets of Europe and the United States. Although it was too exaggerated to describe him as a legend, he could single-handedly affect the situation of the entire European battlefield and hurt Germany, which had a strong military power in World War II. In the eyes of the American soldiers and some fanatical fangirls, Cale was a veritable legendary hero, and his reputation and prestige were even far beyond that of generals and officers. Now Europe was okay. Today in the United States, 6 out of 10 of the promotional videos for the domestic conscription must be exclusive to Cale, and the other 4 were war records of Cale and Captain Steve fighting side by side. One could imagine how powerful Cale's halo as a war hero was now. Hope dimmed and lit again, and the confident young man came back as promised. Carter, standing in the middle of the ballroom, looked at Cale, who came out of the separated singing and dancing crowd, and was speechless for a while. Cale also remained silent and didn't know what to say. Finally he took a deep breath and said, "Sorry I didn't bring Steve back." As soon as these words came out, the relaxed and cheerful atmosphere suddenly solidified and became heavy. Carter took a few steps forward, shook her head and said, "It's not all your fault, we couldn't predict what would happen on the plane. No, it's because I underestimated Schmidt. I thought." Before Cale could finish, Carter shook her head at him again and said slowly, "That's enough. It's all over now." After saying that, Carter extended her hand slightly forward. There was a hint of anticipation in the depths of her beautiful eyes. Her red lips parted slightly. "Didn't Steve ask you to come on his behalf to invite me to a dance? Why are you only here now? It's been 2 weeks. It's a bit far out at sea, so I'm late." Cale casually found an excuse. After a moment of hesitation, he imitated Howard's gentlemanly gesture and reached out his hand to hold Carter's soft hand. "If you don't know how to dance, I can teach you. Just don't step on my shoes," Carter said, and was about to lead Cale to dance slowly to the tune in the hall. "There's no need for that." Cale couldn't help but laugh. In this world, there weren't many common skills that he didn't know. Even if there were, he could just read the card directly. Especially the Green Party Dance Ability card, which he had drawn from Carter, but he hadn't had a chance to use it yet. Just then the gentle tune in the hall stopped, and another hurried and passionate song began to play. Kyle directly took the initiative and began to lead the dance with exquisite dancing skills that were not inferior to professional dancers. Under the exquisite control of his strength, he held Carter's waist with one hand and slightly lifted her into the air as he spun and danced. Carter quickly kept up with the pace, her red dress fluttering in the wind. A hint of surprise flashed in her beautiful eyes. She didn't expect Cale to be so proficient in dancing other than fighting and killing on the battlefield. Cale held Carter's hand with one hand and her slender waist with the other. He began to dance to the increasingly passionate tune. With his strong and perfect body, wearing a tuxedo naturally made him look like a thin gentleman in a greenhouse in the city. He lost some of the coldness and killing intent of the black combat uniform, and gained some gentleness and handsomeness. Paired with the cool and beautiful Carter tonight, the appearance itself was pleasing to the eye. In addition, the two's dance movements were energetic and neat, and they cooperated well. Difficult movements were easily completed, and each of their hand movements and steps were in tune with the tune of the song. Cale and Carter had occupied the center of the ballroom, and the surrounding people's eyes fell on them with amazement and admiration. When the song ended, Cale slowly held Carter's slender waist and steadied her body. Carter pressed her palms lightly on his broad chest. As if they were amazed by the high degree of completeness of the dance, the people in the ballroom applauded. "It's over." Cale shrugged and withdrew his hands. A hint of disappointment flashed in Carter's beautiful eyes. She could only slowly put down her hands and said in surprise, "I didn't expect you to know how to dance. I learned it from my parents at home before I joined the army." Cale answered casually and said straightforwardly, "Is there anything else you want to do? I happen to be free tonight." "Are you preparing to go to the front line tomorrow?" "Oh right, you haven't reported back to the base for half a month." Carter pondered for a moment, then gathered her courage and said, "Then let's go drink." "Drink, you and me?" Cale looked at Carter in surprise. Wasn't this usually reserved for brothers in arms? Why would a man and a woman drink? He thought for a moment and said with hesitation, "You can't really like me like Steve said, right?" Carter was stunned. She avoided Cale's gaze and waved her hand. "How could that be? You're thinking too much." "That's good." Cale breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "I knew it. Steve lied to me in the end. Even if he didn't say that, I would still take care of you." "I don't need you to take care of me." Carter glanced at him and said in a much colder tone, "Are you going to drink or not?" Cale nodded. "Drink. It's rare for me to relax. Why not drink? Just don't get drunk. I can't help someone as big as you." Carter snorted. "Are you kidding? How could that be?" Cale shook his head disinterestedly. This worry didn't exist at all. His super soldier body's metabolism was 4 times that of a human's. How could mere alcohol make him drunk? The next morning, a breeze blew the white gauze curtains and the dazzling golden sunlight shone into the room. Cale gradually woke up from the bed. His head was still a little dizzy with the slight aftereffects of last night's drunkenness. He was really drunk. Kyle smiled bitterly as he lay in bed with his arms and legs spread out. It was too embarrassing for a super soldier. He thought that he wouldn't get drunk, so he kept tasting different wines with high alcohol content. When he realized that he was drunk, it was already too late. However, this was also because he was in the resting stage. It didn't matter if he got drunk once to eliminate the pressure of war. If he was waiting for war or during a mission, he wouldn't even touch a sip of alcohol. Speaking of which, I really troubled Carter last night. Cale pulled the sheets and looked at the swallow-tailed uniform on his body. It was replaced by the simple pajamas provided by the club. He vaguely remembered that Carter and a few other attendants spent a lot of effort to help him into the room last night. It seemed that Carter also helped to take off his clothes. Chapter 54. What's the saying? Oh, drunken sex. Cale quickly got up and looked at the bed, the floor, and the bathroom. He didn't find any women's clothes and was secretly relieved. It's good that nothing happened last night. He didn't want to help the frozen Steve take care of her and end up in bed. But where did the tuxedo he was wearing go? Yesterday was a rest time, and Cale didn't let Venom transform into a dress uniform. Last time he almost exposed himself out of curiosity. Instead he turned Venom into a card and put on real clothes. This also led to the fact that he didn't know what happened after he got drunk last night. Maybe the waiter took it to wash. Cale didn't care. It was just a piece of clothing and it wasn't a very expensive thing. He simply washed his body in the bathroom, and after putting on his underwear he took out the Venom card from the card space and threw it on the bed to make it materialize. Gurgle, Venom moved in the quilt, and the black lines formed by its own liquid drooped down humanely, as if it was telling Cale something aggrieved. It got used to fusing in symbiosis with Kale on the battlefield, and it became more and more obsessed with this symbiotic state. In other words, all creatures subconsciously yearn for evolution. And Venom's symbiotic race itself relied on the fusion and symbiosis with other creatures to gradually learn the physical abilities of the host, so as to achieve the evolutionary process of improving its own strength. Okay, it's time to go back to the base, Kale said as he stretched out his hand towards Venom. Venom's liquid body suddenly turned into countless black lines happily, extending along his palm to his body, entangling, wrapping, and finally transforming. Kale looked at the full set of black clothes on his body and patted the logo on his chest. It's not a combat suit, let's change into something more casual first. Swish, like the camouflage of a chameleon, Kale's combat suit quickly changed into a jacket and jeans. Carrying Venom on his body every day has such a benefit. It can save money on clothes and the trivial time of changing clothes. Out of the room, Kale walked in the corridor of the club, and the waiters along the way greeted him with a fawning greeting. For the VIP with military power and wealth, they couldn't wait for Kale to come every day and hold a party. Seeing that he was about to walk out of the club's main entrance, Kale seemed to think of something and stopped a passing waitress and asked, "Let me ask you something, where is the lady who danced with me last night?" "Mr. Kale, you're talking about Miss Carter." The waitress hurriedly stopped in her tracks and answered, "Miss Carter left the club alone early today." "Is that so? She didn't wait for me to return to the base." Kale shook his head, his left hand reached into his wallet pocket and materialized something under the cover of the pocket. He quickly took out a club card and handed it to the waitress. "This is the VIP card I opened here last night. There should be more than $9,000 in it. In the future, when Carter comes here to dance again, all the expenses will be covered by this card." The waitress bowed her head and took the VIP card with both hands. When she looked up again, she found that Kale had walked out of the main entrance, leaving her with a tall and cold back. Training Base Basement, Scientific Research Department. Kale's front foot had just walked through the door when a strong explosion was accompanied by a familiar figure in a research suit. The figure was thrown to the ground by the blast wave, and smoke was still coming out of his body. "Howard, you're still the same." Kale stared at the scientific gentleman lying on the ground with a strange expression. Kale? The gentleman was stunned when he saw Kale at the door. He immediately rubbed his eyes, and after confirming that there was no mistake, he excitedly climbed up from the ground. "Kale, you're finally back." Howard quickly stepped forward. Due to his height, he could only hug Kyle's belt a little. He said agitatedly, "If you didn't come back, I wouldn't be in the mood to go to banquets and bars during this period of time. You're not only my friend and comrade, but also the best partner to create the top industry with me in the future." The last sentence is the key. You haven't finished studying the thing I gave you. Don't think you can get some black technology from me? Kale ridiculed and pushed him away to prevent Howard from looking at him. If it wasn't for Carter's request to go alone last night, I wouldn't have been able to resist going into the club to see you," Howard said with a smile. He was sincerely happy that his friend in front of him could come back. "You know that the box was from me?" Kale looked at Howard in surprise. This was a ball gown, a rose card, and so on. Most people would think that it was another gentleman who admired Carter. At the very least, they would think that Steve was back, Howard said cheerfully. "You underestimate Agent Carter." She recognized the English handwriting on the box and the card at a glance. "Is that so?" Kale went silent. Last night's scenes flashed through his mind and he realized that he might have missed something. "Alright, didn't the beauty Carter come back with you? Could it be?" Howard's gaze became strange. It was similar to studying scientific strategies, filled with the curiosity of a gentleman. "Don't misunderstand. Last night, nothing happened between her and me. I thought she went back to the base a long time ago." Kale waved his hand a little guiltily and changed the topic. "Alright, when I entered the training base, I noticed that there were fewer soldiers stationed there. Where did Fry run off to?" "Oh, you just came back to the base, so you don't know the current situation." Howard suddenly realized and said with a serious face, "The leaders of our army, Britain, and the Soviet Union decided at the alliance meeting not long ago to take advantage of Germany's crushing defeat on the front lines to gather their forces and attack Germany from the English Channel." The alliance of the three countries attacking Germany? Starting from the English Channel? The Normandy landing. The name of this battle flashed through Kale's mind. He never thought that the Marvel world would be so similar to the history of the world in his previous life and walk down the same path of war. The Normandy landing was a historical large-scale battle at the end of World War II. After this battle, Germany was completely conquered and surrendered. Only the Japanese on the Asian battlefield were left to bitterly hold on. Howard continued, "Last night we have already conveyed the message of your return to the headquarters. General Chester replied and ordered you to hurry to the UA base in Europe after returning to the training base. That really didn't let me have any free time." Cale shrugged. His blue eyes revealed a dangerous coldness. His body and Venom suit were quietly excited. Chapter 55. Speaking of which, where were you during the half a month you were missing? Howard asked Cale in confusion. Cale hesitated for a moment and quickly replied, "Steve sank the lost fighter into the sea alone. I parachuted in advance and landed on a barren island in the shape of a turtle in the Atlantic Ocean. I rested there for a while." "A barren island in the shape of a turtle?" Howard murmured and had a new question. "Then how did you come back?" He didn't know that Cale had a card space with him. Not to mention the means of transportation across the sea, he had planes, tanks, villas, food, etc. There was a mutated giant eagle beast on the barren island. After I tamed it, I let it carry me back. Cale spread out his hands and said. He had answered many questions to cover up the existence of the card space, so he was unusually good at answering them. A barren island in the shape of a turtle and a mutated monster. It seems that your luck is really good. Howard nodded and smiled. He didn't delve further. This industrial partner of his was not an ordinary person. Since he had studied the mobile phone and the supercomputer system program chip that Cale gave him, his mind was more and more convinced of this judgment. It was precisely because of this that Howard would feel lucky to be Cale's friend. He could use this to avoid detours in the field of science and technology for a few decades. Cale looked at the smile on Howard's face and nodded thoughtfully. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Howard, this old gentleman, was not as simple as a Frankenstein. He could deal with the important scientific strategy department of the military and his own private Stark Industries. He was also a sensible person. He knew what to ask and what not to ask. The relationship between the two of them. Through the comrades in arms in the military, daily friends and private business partners, under the two-line maintenance of interests and friendship, they would never do anything to harm each other. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were close friends. It seemed that there were some things that he could discuss with the person in front of him without worry. Cale made up his mind. He looked at Howard and said, "That turtle-shaped island is in the center of the Atlantic Ocean. The location and environment are very good. After the war is over, if you can find a good construction engineer or company, I might be able to use it." World War II is still going on, and you're already thinking about what will happen after the war? Howard blinked but quickly fell into deep thought. He pondered and said, "Do you want to develop it into villas and apartments after the war is over, or something like a fortress? It's a casual fortress that can withstand the bombardment of missiles, firearms, and so on. No matter how much it is, it will all be deducted from the dividends of Stark Industries," Cale said directly. Howard nodded and agreed without hesitation. "All right then, I've also minored in construction engineering. When the war is over, I'll go with you to that turtle-shaped island. I'll arrange for people to build it. Then I'll have to trouble you." Cale's eyes showed a slight sense of expectation. Not to mention that the war was still far from over. When the upcoming Normandy landing campaign was over, it wouldn't take long for the world to return to peace. The turtle-shaped island that he had been talking about was naturally the only purple creature card in the card space. Super large ancient dragon turtle. Ever since he drew that card, Cale began to have an idea. To create his own fortress base and family force. In the future, no matter how high his military rank was, even if he was a general, he would only be an officer in the UA who followed orders. Even if he was the future director of SHELD, and had the strongest elite force under his command, he would still be suppressed by various treaties and his power would be taken away by various hidden enemies. Although Cale believed that he would be stronger in the future, he didn't want to always fight alone. If he could build his own elite force in advance or even establish a legendary family in the world of Marvel, that would be the real future. So, now that Kyle had told Howard about the construction of the fortress in advance, it was the first step towards creating the family's influence in the future. Howard could guess some of Cale's intentions, but he wouldn't disclose this information to anyone. On the contrary, he would keep Cale's secret and do his best to help build the fortress base in the future. This was the tacit understanding and trust between the two men. "I'll keep an eye on the construction team for you from now on. You're about to go to the UA military base to prepare for the battle. I made you a new piece of equipment that should be useful," Howard said, waved his hand, and took Cale into the storage area of the laboratory. It was the usual air-delivered storage box. Howard opened it on the table and two overlapping black round objects lay in the box. This thing is the crystallization of my anti-gravity research for so many years. It took me half a month to make two pieces. It can't be mass-produced. Before Howard could explain, Cale's attention fell on the two magnet-like round objects and instantly got the corresponding item card information. Gravity magnet. 2 gravity magnets, one positive and one negative. Blue item card. Gravity magnet, made of fine anti-gravity research parts, can change the gravitational field in a small area when it touches the ground. When the positive gravity magnet falls on the ground, the gravitational force of the area within a radius of 10 meters will double. When the anti-gravity magnet falls on the ground, the gravitational force of the area within a radius of 10 meters will double. When the two positive and negative magnets touch the ground at the same time, the effect will be offset. The positive and negative gravity magnets will attract each other. If one is thrown on the ground, the other can be sucked back. Cale picked up the gravity magnets and tried to throw one of them into the open space at his feet. Pop! The moment the anti-gravity magnet fell on the ground, the gravity in the lab suddenly doubled. Howard was still explaining how to use it, but because of the doubled gravity, he immediately lost his balance and sat directly on the floor. Not bad. Cale nodded and commented. Even he could feel some resistance around his body. The increase in the gravitational field indirectly doubled his weight. Ordinary people would not be able to withstand it. Cale aimed the positive and negative magnets in his hand at the magnet on the ground. Under the attraction of the positive and negative magnets, the magnetic magnet immediately flew away from the ground and the gravitational field in the lab returned to normal. Howard wiped the sweat off his forehead, stood up and concluded, the increase or decrease of the gravitational field doesn't make much of a difference to the physical fitness of your super soldiers. However, once ordinary soldiers suddenly fall into the gravitational field that is doubled or decreased, they will be a little overwhelmed and lose part of their combat ability. I'll take this. Also, I have something for you to study. Take it as a gift to the country. Cale said as he put the backpack he had been carrying on his back on the table. As soon as the zipper was opened, the blue light inside slowly seeped out. Chapter 56. Europe's British coastal area, the U.S. military's temporary base. After the leaders of the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union decided to form an alliance and invade Germany together, in less than a month, the American temporary base had expanded more than 5 times its original size. Countless temporary military tents were set up inside the base. The U.S. military forces that were once distributed on the front lines in Europe all received the order of the 5-star general to gather here. More weapons and ammunition were being transported here day and night. And this was only the preparation stage of the U.S. fleet. In addition to most soldiers crossing the strait through ships and landing directly on Germany opposite the British coast, there were also thousands of Air Force fighter jets busy preparing in other bases. This was the eve of a super large-scale battle. More than 100,000 U.S. soldiers were the main force and temporarily camped in the base, waiting for the time to gather and attack. At this time, in the temporary U.S. base, teams of shirtless U.S. soldiers were exercising in the vast open space of the camp. Under the direct sunlight at noon, the atmosphere was full of hormones. Major Cale's plane is about to arrive. The hero that symbolizes the strength and conquest of the U.S. is coming to our base. No one knew who first spread this kind of news, but it quickly became a sensational and powerful hurricane that swept through the entire U.S. base. Cale is here. This demonic slogan that could instantly stop the naughty behavior and crying of German children, in the ears of the U.S. people and soldiers, had another almost fanatical effect of group encouragement. In just half a minute, almost all the UA soldiers who had nothing to do rushed to the shutdown area of the HQ. For a moment, half of the roads inside the HQ were filled with flying dust. Joseph, who was also in the base, opened the doors and windows of the officers' conference room. He looked at the fanatical soldiers outside the window and couldn't help but sigh. Cale, that kid is really amazing. As long as he's here, the morale of the entire base will soar. This is the charm of a war hero. Brant sat in his office seat gloomily and stared blankly at the base that had suddenly become lively. He pursed his lips and didn't make a sound. Joseph blinked and said, "Brant, are you still troubled by the previous conflict? I believe Cale has long forgotten about that small matter." Of course he forgot. Brant shook his head and said angrily, "I'm still a second lieutenant. He's already a major and an American hero. It's my honor to compete with an American hero in marksmanship." Joseph sighed inwardly, knowing that Brant was still unable to let go of the past during his training. Indeed, a recruit that he didn't think highly of used less than a year to make half the world remember his name. This was really too damaging to the reputation of a recruit instructor. But who could be blamed for this? Then I'll go and take a look. It's very dusty outside. You can stay in the room. After Joseph finished speaking, he put on his hat and walked out of the meeting room, closing the door and windows. Brant was left alone in the office. He wanted to complain, but in the end, all the words he wanted to say turned into a sigh. Originally, 2 American heroes could have emerged from the recruits he taught at the same time, in the shutdown area of the main base. The transport jet hummed as it slid down from the end of the runway and stopped on the ground. 4 soldiers with guns jumped down from the door first. After they lowered the stairs, they stood face to face in the open space in front of the jet door. Cale stepped on the stairs lowered by the fuselage and walked out of the transport jet. He wore his usual black and cold special combat suit. 2 small energy pistols were tied to the outside of his legs. A sodium-carbon steel sword with a leather sheath hung on his back. The combat suit had a devil's cross symbol on the chest and the UA Major's insignia on the left shoulder. The sun outside was very glaring. Cale originally wanted to block the sun with his hand, but as soon as he walked out of the transport jet and looked straight ahead, he was slightly stunned in the next moment. Tens of thousands of UA soldiers in military combat suits stood in the large open space next to the transport jet. There was no end in sight at a glance. When they saw Cale, they didn't make any disrespectful actions such as cheering or whistling. Instead, they quickly raised their hands and clapped with love and respect on their faces. The waves of applause converged into thunder and resounded over the main base. "Cale, you're finally back." From the crowd of soldiers, a black officer wearing a left eye patch squeezed out and walked excitedly toward Cale. "You said I'm a war maniac, how can I not be in a large-scale war?" Cale shrugged, hugged Fry and patted each other's back. "Hiss, your strength has improved a lot, use less strength." Fry took a deep breath and took half a step back. "It's SOSO," Cale said with a smile. The physique of a super soldier was fixed at a peak and could not be improved through exercise. Fry felt that the increase in strength came only from the continuous growth of the venom suit on his body. "Cale?" A loud voice sounded, and Joseph also squeezed out of the crowd of soldiers with some effort. "Instructor Joseph, you're here too." Cale nodded to him and asked, "You often go back to New York, how is Lucy now?" "She's fine, I've already spoken to the local police station, don't worry," Joseph said with a smile. "Thank you, next time you go back, please help me bring something back to her." Cale nodded. He didn't forget Lucy who lived in his home, but the battlefield had been in Europe and there was not much time to return to New York. "No problem," Joseph agreed. Fry urged, "Cale, I'm not just here to pick you up, I'm also here with General Chet's orders. He asked me to go to the base command room to see him immediately after you arrive at the main base." General Chet, the commander-in-chief of the Allied forces in this battle. Cale nodded and immediately let Fry lead the way. Cale walked forward and the crowd of soldiers suddenly separated, making a smooth path. Except for the soldiers of the original training base, the 102nd Regiment and the Roaring Commandos, the rest of the frontline troops and the new recruits had never seen Cale before. At this time, seeing the war hero in person, their hearts were surging. Chapter 57. With Fry leading the way, Cale followed him to the command room of the U.S. General Base. "You can go in, I'm just helping to pass on a message." Fry stopped at the door of the command room and motioned for Cale to go in alone. "Okay, I'll find you later." Cale nodded and walked directly into the command room without any stage fright. The room was monotonous and simple, with a huge strategic map as a decorative background banner, and the U.S. flag with stripes and stars. A middle-aged officer was sitting behind a military desk piled with documents. The middle-aged officer looked to be in his early 40s, with a dignified and tough face. He was wearing a full officer's uniform, and the left chest of the uniform was clearly pinned with the noble rank of general with 5 stars on it. 5-star general. The highest-ranking general in the U.S. during World War II, and the supreme commander of the Tri-Nation Alliance this time. Cale looked at the general in front of him, stood firmly on his feet, gave a standard salute and said loudly, "Major Cale, here to report." General Chester looked up and his sharp eyes looked up and down at Cale, who was standing within 3 meters of him, and then nodded with a gentle smile. "Major Cale, you're finally back." Cale nodded and said, "Yes, in the Battle of the Alps, there was an accident in the end when we were chasing Hydra's leader, Schmidt. Steve lost control of the fighter plane and fell into the sea, and I parachuted back in advance to escape." I've already read the telegram sent by Agent Carter for the specific details. General Chester sighed regretfully and said to Cale, "Your safe return is already the greatest victory for our army. At the critical moment of World War II, war heroes can't fall easily." General Chester paused for a moment and said meaningfully, "Actually, I've wanted to see you for a long time. You know, the super soldier experiment was originally completed under my orders. You refused the pioneer experiment of the super soldier and gave the opportunity to Steve, who was in the same camp. This is still fresh in my memory." Cale was embarrassed and shrugged. "About this, I can only say that I was too proud at the time and didn't cherish the opportunity to become a super soldier. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to become the second super soldier by coincidence. It turns out that you have the capital to be proud." General Chester shook his head gently and said in a deep voice, "After Steve became the only super soldier, I was also very optimistic about the justice and iron will of the United States in him, so I specially taught him combat skills. Although it was beyond my expectations that Steve could become Captain America, it was still within my expectations. But you, Cale, from a recruit in the training base to creating miracles on the frontline battlefield, step by step, through your own strength to become the hero who dominates the battlefield today, it is far beyond my imagination." After General Chester finished speaking, he looked at Cale with undisguised admiration. "Like it's all luck," Cale said modestly. The general had praised him to the heavens, so it was rare for him to keep a low profile. "If it's all luck, then I hope the goddess spent all her luck on you," General Chester joked. General Chester teased and then said seriously, "Yesterday, after knowing that you returned safely to the training base, I specially contacted the president to discuss your matter." "Discuss me?" Kyle was slightly taken aback as he waited for General Chester's next words. General Chester said seriously, "I suggested that you be promoted to Major General as an exception, and the president has already agreed." Major General? Cale was completely stunned this time. What did Major General mean? It was the rank of a general. Although he had previously jumped from a recruit to a corporal, then from a corporal to a second lieutenant, then from a second lieutenant to a major, the jump this time was simply too shocking. It had to be known that every time a major was promoted, it required a large amount of time and accumulation of military merits, and Cale had only been promoted to major for less than a month. "General Chester, I don't think I've accumulated enough military merits to be promoted to Major General yet," Cale said with a bit of hesitation. "Ha, if it's just based on military merits, then even if I work hard for 50 years, I'll only be a 4-star general at most." General Chester laughed and reminded Cale, "This is the Second World War, there are exceptions to everything." "That's right. There was only one 5-star general in the United States during World War II. Cale nodded thoughtfully. General Chester continued, "Those peacetime military rules don't apply here. As long as you can lead the war to victory, you can even become a 5-star general, let alone a major general. It's just a major general, there's no reason why I don't dare to take it." Cale nodded confidently and threw out his last concern, "It's just that I'm better at fighting alone on the battlefield than commanding soldiers. Isn't it a bit too extravagant to give me the title of Major General?" "It's not extravagant at all." General Chester smiled and answered, "With your reputation as a war hero, even if you were to make an exception and be promoted to Major General, all of our soldiers would raise both hands in approval. More importantly, in the upcoming battle against Germany, our army will be leading the battle against the Allies. You are a hero of our generation, but your status as a major will inevitably be looked down upon by some officers from other countries." Hearing this, Cale quickly understood. General Chester made an exception to promote him to Major General not just for him, but for the face of the entire country and the army. A hero who symbolized the strength of the country and was only a major? That wouldn't do, he had to be at least a general to have face. General Chester finally said slowly, "The part of the army you command can be handed over to an officer you trust enough to take command. If there are no other questions, you'll be a Major General from now on. The corresponding rank badge can be handed over to you now. I'll also help you submit the relevant information. This promotion news will be spread before our army meets up with the Allied army." "General, you've already arranged everything, so why should I refuse?" Cale spread his hands. This was a Major General rank being forced on him, there was no reason not to accept. 5 minutes later, Cale left the command room speechlessly. Fry had been waiting outside the command room the whole time. When he saw Cale come out, he immediately went up to greet him. "Hey Cale. What's wrong? You look unhappy. See for yourself." Cale lifted his left shoulder expressionlessly. "Jim? Your major rank, how did it become 1 star? Fury's words came to an abrupt halt as he rubbed his right eye. He widened his eyes and bitterly said, "Is there something wrong with my other eye? Why do I see the insignia of a major general?" "You didn't see wrong. It's a major general," Kale said uninterestedly. Chapter 58. 3 days later, the time for the allied forces of the 3 countries to assemble and land on the enemy's coast was approaching. In the early morning, dozens of large steel ships were anchored near the coast of the United Kingdom, waiting for the main force of the UA base to board first. At this time, in the sea area slightly ahead of the group of ships, a giant battleship stretched across the sea like an overlord. The flagpole with stripes and stars fluttered in the wind. The hull was under the protection of multiple steel armor layers, loaded with high-speed and powerful anti-aircraft firepower. It was like a steel castle standing in the sea. At the bow of the deck of this giant battleship, Kale stood alone in the fence. In addition to the black battle suit transformed by venom, he also wore a general's coat that represented his identity, making him look cold and majestic. Kyle was probably the only one who dared to wear a general's coat like that. The wind on the sea blew in his face, lifting up his fine blonde hair and the sleeves of his general's coat. Ta-ta-ta, hurried footsteps came from behind Kale. Lieutenant Fry stood still and saluted, reporting. The captain of the ship, the Navy, the accompanying medical staff, and the land combat soldiers have all boarded the battleship. Major General Kale, please give the next instructions. Kale nodded. Very good, let them prepare for battle on the ship first. There is still half a day before the attack. Yes. Fry saluted and turned to leave. When he turned back and was about to leave, he turned back and said with a bitter face, "Kale, are you the Major General or am I the Major General? It was fine when you were in the assault on the Roaring Team, but now you are a general, there is no reason to leave the management to me." "Isn't this the case of capable people doing more work?" Kale shrugged and glanced back at Fry with a smile. "You know, I am not very good at commanding. When I was in charge of the assault on the Roaring Team, you were in charge of the soldiers, let alone the 3,000 soldiers this time. Also, this is to train your mental endurance as soon as possible. The future of S.H.E.L.D. is what you need to worry about." Kale murmured the last sentence. "What are you talking about? The wind is strong, I can't hear you clearly." Fry asked in surprise. Kale stretched his back and waved his hand, urging him to leave. "Fry, I'll leave all the military arrangements to you. Hurry up and go. Wait till my military rank surpasses yours, then you'll see how I'll order you around." Fry clenched his teeth and left with a dark expression. He was just venting his emotions. Surpassing Kale in terms of military rank? That was impossible. Within a year he had gone from a recruit to a major general. The title of being the youngest major general in history was no longer enough to describe how exaggerated this was. However, 3 days ago, the news of the promotion had spread throughout the American base. Not only did the countless American soldiers in the camp not have any objections, they even felt that it was reasonable. The American hero who symbolized strength and conquest, the soldier who forced the German army to withdraw from the European front-line battlefield, and the greatest contributor to the elimination of the Hydra organization in one fell swoop. Only a major? No face at all. A major general was normal. It had to be said that the soldiers of the entire American army were bragging. If anyone dared to slander them, their comrades in the same camp would probably turn against them. "Why does it feel like I'm the spokesperson of war?" Kale touched his chin and yawned slightly towards the sea in front of him. There was still some time to prepare for the war. His body felt a lot more relaxed due to the boredom. It was better to go back to the control center of the ship and look at the strategic map. Kale thought so and slowly walked away from the deck. However, at the corner of the passage down the stairs, a petite female military doctor unexpectedly bumped into him head-on. "Oh?" Kale frowned slightly. Although his body was relaxed, his reaction speed as a super soldier was not fake. He cleverly dodged to the side, brushing past the military doctor who was about to fall to the ground. Then he reached back and grabbed the back of the doctor's collar. "Wah!" The female military doctor screamed in panic. When she came to her senses, she was lifted up by Kale like a kitten by the collar. "Are you okay?" Kale asked and slowly put the other party on the ground. The female military doctor was so scared that her face was a little pale. Her legs softened as she sat down on the floor of the passage inside the ship. She shook her short light red hair and said timidly, I'm okay. A woman? A military doctor accompanying the army? Kale glanced at the female military doctor on the ground. She looked at most 16 years old. Her body had not fully developed. After all, her chest had just started to bulge. However, it still could not hide the fact that she was a little beauty. Reddish hair, white skin, delicate face, slender figure, and a white military doctor's dress. With a pitiful and delicate expression, she looked like she would make people want to protect her. Of course, Kale was not a lolicon. He was not interested in a girl whose body had not yet matured. However, when he focused his attention, the ability cards that appeared on the girl's body aroused his interest. First aid proficiency, ballet proficiency, English proficiency. Well, there was nothing wrong with these ability cards. However, there was still true assassination proficiency, true pistol proficiency, true disguise proficiency, close combat proficiency, Soviet secret signal proficiency, psychological tactics proficiency. Well, forget about the above. However, other than these dozens of green ability cards, the female military doctor also had a very important card. Super Agent. The constitution of a super agent above the top agents, super soldier version. Blue ability card. After genetic modification, it will greatly slow down the speed of aging and strengthen the immune system and resistance to attacks. It will also obtain the top physical strength, speed, reaction, and intelligence of a normal human. It will maintain its combat state for a long time. Current status. Can be drawn. Cannot be used at the same time as the super soldier ability. Interesting. Kale whispered softly. His eyes lit up as he looked at the female military doctor on the ground. Interesting? The female military doctor was stunned. Then she pitifully covered her slender calf. Her white skin was scratched and some blood was flowing out. She timidly took a deep breath and said, "General Kale, can I trouble you to send me to the ship's medical room?" Kale didn't reply. He asked, "What's your name?" "My name is Satana." The female military doctor said weakly, "Satana." Kale repeated her name. He quickly smiled and nodded. He reached out his hand. Just when Satana thought that Kale was going to help her up, Kale directly waved at the Navy soldier passing by not far away. "Come here and send this military doctor to the medical room." "Yes, General Kale." The Navy soldier quickly obeyed and quickly stepped forward. He helped Satana away from the scene. It wasn't until the two disappeared from the ship's corridor that a trace of coldness appeared on Kale's face. Soviet Union, Secret Service Red Room. Chapter 59. Inside the commander's office on the giant battleship. "Kale, I've brought all the information you asked for on the military doctor." Fry walked into the room with a stack of bound documents and placed them on the desk. Kale nodded coldly as he sat in the office chair. He took the documents and began to flip through them one by one. Fry stood in front of the desk and looked at Kale with a puzzled expression. "I thought you had thought it through and wanted to take care of the Major General's affairs. Why are you so concerned about the military doctor on the battleship?" "I met an interesting guy," Kale replied casually. His eyes narrowed slightly as he flipped through the documents in his hand. He found a personal file that he wanted to read. On the personal file, there was a black and white photo of the female military doctor with a bright smile on her face. Satana Caroline, female, age 16, height 165 centimeters, weight 43 kilograms. Born in 1928, home is located at B012, Atlanta, USA. Current family status: single, parents are local farm workers. Student of the St. Level Medical School. In January 1944, she passed the school's voluntary application to support the front line. In February, she became a first aid military doctor. 16 years old, just became a military doctor this month. Kale raised his eyebrows and threw the file in his hand on the desk. He asked expressionlessly, "She's underage and just became a military doctor this month. Can she directly participate in a large-scale battle on the battleship?" "There's nothing surprising about that." Fry touched his bald head and replied, "During World War II there were exceptions to everything. There were not enough medical personnel in the military to begin with. Some hospitals or schools would often advertise and recruit volunteers. There were more than 150,000 American soldiers involved in this battle. Most of them were from the Army, so every battleship needs to be equipped with a team of medical personnel." Kale did not speak. His fingers tapped on the desk as if he was thinking about something. Fry was also a smart person. His eyes fell on the file and said solemnly, "Is there a problem with this female medical personnel?" "There is a problem, but you don't have to worry about it." "Leave it to me," Kale said as he gave Fry a secret order. "I understand." Fury nodded and left the office as if he had received an order. Kale folded the documents neatly and placed them in the drawer. He sneered. I want to see what tricks the Soviet Union wants to play by sending an untrained agent. At this time, in the medical room of the battleship. Little Nana, I heard that you almost ran into Major General Kale? Hey, are you serious? Is Major Kale as cool and handsome as in the documentary? Is that the main point? Be careful, don't give the general any trouble next time. 4 young female nurses in white dresses were discussing enthusiastically. As they talked, their faces turned pink. Satana finished bandaging her slender calf and sat on the single medical bed in the room. She looked out of the circular glass window at the side of the room and stared at the blue sea outside. She was in a daze. The first plan, the unexpected bridge encounter, had failed. Thinking back to the encounter just now, Satana clenched her fists so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Oh my God. Is there anyone who treats a beautiful girl like a kitten? Usually when a normal man faces a girl, shouldn't he reach out and hold her? Could it be that I'm not pretty enough? Satana touched her face subconsciously. From the moment she entered the Red Room, the organization had taught her to achieve her goals by hook or by crook. Of course, the temptation of beauty was one of the secret weapons exclusive to female agents. No, she could not deny her outstanding appearance because of one failure. The main reason for the failure was that the target was not a normal man. Satana thought to herself. After all, the target was an executioner with tens of thousands of enemy lives in his hands. He was a war demon in the eyes of the enemy countries. In fact, when the organization announced that the target of this test mission was the U.S. military, Kale, who knew how many senior agents turned pale, afraid that they would be selected. Later, it was Satana who took the initiative to take this test mission. As for the reason, it could only be said that she had no choice. Not to carry out her first mission with Kale as the target, which was to assassinate the leader of the ninja organization Hand. Compared to the latter, the former mission was safer for her as a native of the U.S. Plan 1 has failed. I have to find another opportunity to contact the target. Satana was thinking about this when suddenly a Navy soldier rushed into the infirmary in a panic. Major General Kale may not have been on a ship before, so he's not used to the environment here. He's a bit unwell right now. Before the Navy soldier finished speaking, the female military doctors in the infirmary had already raised their hands and said in unison, I'll go. Please let me take care of him. Would a legendary hero like that also get seasick? Before Satana had time to think too much, the Navy soldier said with a troubled expression. Major Kale said that he just met a military doctor named Satana. Just let her go. Which one of you is Satana? Come with me. As soon as these words came out, Satana was stunned. The other female military doctors also focused their envious and jealous gazes on her. The Navy soldier urged, You must be Satana. Hurry up and take the medical kit and come with me. Okay. Satana reacted and nodded. After taking a deep breath, she pulled herself together and got down from the infirmary bed. No matter what, this was the best opportunity to get close to the target. The Navy soldier led Satana, who was carrying the medical kit, all the way to the door of the office. He knocked on the door and reported, Major General Kale, I've brought the military doctor. Let her in. The young man's calm voice came from behind the door. Okay. After the Navy soldier finished speaking, he opened the door and motioned for Satana to go in by herself. Satana slowly stepped into the door. As soon as she entered the office, the door behind her was closed by the Navy soldier who left. She followed his gaze and looked forward. Kale was sitting in the office chair with one hand on his forehead and closed his eyes to rest. His handsome face was gloomy and uncertain, as if he was really sick. General Kale. Satana walked to the office chair and stopped in front of it. She called out tentatively. Kale opened his eyes and looked at Satana. He said softly, You're here. When I came down from the deck just now, my head was dizzy and I felt a little nauseous. This is the precursor of seasickness. People who take a ship for the first time will feel slight discomfort. You can take some seasickness medicine to reduce the reaction. Satana said softly as she found a box of pills from the medical kit. She carefully took out 2 pills and handed them to Kale. Then give it a try. Kale nodded and glanced at the seasickness pills. Then he took it and swallowed it with a cup of warm water. As long as he focused on an item, the exact information of the item card would appear in front of his eyes. This made it so that even if it was a well-designed poison, Kale would not fall for it as long as he was prepared. Chapter 60. In the office of the battleship. Satana didn't know that she had walked on the edge of death. She just looked at Kale in the office chair with concern. waiting for his next instructions. Kale secretly laughed. The agents trained by the Soviet Red Room were indeed the best in the world. From the super agent drug to the ability and quality that an agent should have, everything was complete. Don't look at Satana in front of him as an underage agent trainee. Her combat strength in the entire U.S. military base was something that few soldiers or officers could beat. In addition, super combat strength was one thing. This infiltration and disguise as a timid and weak female military doctor was as simple as drinking water. Unfortunately, she met him. Kale narrowed his eyes. Satana's infiltration disguise could be said to be perfect, but it was nothing under the card draw ability. No matter how carefully you planned, no matter how amazing your acting was, the shiny blue ability card, Super Agent, on the back of your head would expose everything. The office was silent for a while. After Kale took a few sips of warm water, he waved at Satana, who was standing, and said with a slight frown, "My head is a little dizzy. Do you know how to massage the head and shoulders? Give me a little massage." Satana hesitated for a moment, then nodded like a chick pecking rice. She walked around the desk with small steps and walked to the back of Kale's chair. She didn't notice that when she passed by the chair, Kale's slightly opened blue eyes appeared a little cold. The best time for the assassination had been created. Next, Satana's life and death were in her own hands. Whether the other party was a hero in the future or not, as long as there was a slight signal to launch an assassination, Kale would not hesitate to kill her here. This was Kale's bottom line. His enemies could only lie on the ground and turn into corpses. "General, you can close your eyes for a moment. The massage will be much more comfortable," Satana said in a low voice, her small hands slowly reaching for the back of Kale's head. "Okay, use more strength." Kale nodded in response. As he closed his eyes, he concentrated and tensed up. The other party didn't have any weapons on him, so the strength of his muscles alone wasn't enough to break his neck. But just in case, he had already put his venom suit into a defensive state. Soon, Satana's 10 slender fingers landed on the back of Kale's head. She pressed down slightly, rubbing down to his neck, shoulders, and then up to his forehead. Kale, whose body had been a little stiff, immediately relaxed and let out a sigh of relief. What was with this unexpected comfort? It had to be said that Satana's massage technique was very proficient. This should be one of the specialties learned during the agent training. Furthermore, the girl's fingers were slender and strong. Wait, that doesn't seem to be the main point. "Are you not going to make a move?" Kale was puzzled and couldn't understand. The Soviet Red Room organization sent a super agent to lurk at this critical moment of war. If it wasn't for him, then what was it for? The target wasn't him? Or the purpose of the mission wasn't to assassinate him? It was true when he thought about it. Although the Soviet Union liked to cause trouble, they wouldn't send agents to assassinate the new Major General, a hero of the United States. Under Kale's doubts, Satana massaged for 10 minutes before stopping. She panted slightly and waved her sore fingers. This man's bones and muscles were much denser than expected. Sure enough, it was as the organization said in the mission, the ability of a super soldier. Satana made up her mind and whispered in Kale's ear, "General Kale, how do you feel? Is your head still dizzy?" Kale tilted his head slightly and said with his eyes closed in enjoyment, "Much better." "That's good, but a large-scale war is about to begin. It's best to investigate any symptoms in advance." Satana paused and gave professional advice. "Just in case, it's best for the general to prick a drop of blood on your finger and let me take it back to the infirmary for testing. It will be able to show the detailed condition of your body in a physical examination." "A blood test?" Kale opened his eyes completely at this time, revealing a subtle expression of understanding. He didn't expect that the agent mission was just to get a little of his blood. With the venom suit, even if he suffered a superficial wound, he wouldn't leave his own blood on the previous battlefield. A drop of blood seemed to have little significance. But after all, it was the world of Marvel with high-tech and biological branches. Who knows what the mad scientists of the Soviet Union were planning to do with this drop of blood? Don't let them create a human or something. Now that he knew the purpose, Kale didn't have to play along with the other party anymore. His tone turned cold and he said, "Is this your purpose?" "What purpose?" Satana, who was still sitting on the back of the office chair, was stunned. She reluctantly maintained her calm and said softly, "General Kale, what are you talking about? This is just a simple blood test." Kale threw out a sentence that broke her last line of defense. "Do you still want to continue pretending? Soviet Red Room agents." Before he finished speaking, Satana's face changed. Her hands suddenly slashed towards the back of Kale's neck, trying to stun him. "I'll play with you." Kyle snorted coldly. His reaction was even faster. He raised his hands and grabbed the girl's hands that hadn't fallen down yet. Satana tried hard to pull her hands away, but found that Kale's hands were like steel pliers. She couldn't even move a finger. Just when she wanted to kick with her feet, a crushing force came from her arms, and then her whole body was lifted up and flipped 180 degrees over Kale's head and slammed on the hardwood desk. Crack! The desk collapsed and split on both sides. Satana groaned in pain as she lay on the scattered pieces of wood and documents. Cough, cough. Satana just coughed and struggled to get up. Under her slightly frightened eyes, she saw the handsome young man throw the general's coat aside, revealing the venom suit that was cold and murderous inside. Very good, stand up like this. Let me see the strength of the Soviet Union's super agent. Kale looked at her indifferently. His muscles were clearly protruding under the black suit, and his murderous aura shrouded the entire office. Chapter 61. In the interior corridor of the battleship, Fry, dressed in a first lieutenant officer uniform, trotted in a hurry to Kale's office. The female military doctor suspected to be a foreign agent has been in the office for some time, and he also wanted to see how the matter was handled. As soon as he arrived outside the closed iron door of the office, Fry vaguely heard the conversation between Kale and the female military doctor. Are you coming over? I'm not coming over. Then I'm coming over. Don't come over. The short and boring conversation ended, followed by the sound of fierce fighting in the office. Fry was about to knock on the door when the other side of the iron door was hit by something with a bang, and even the iron door made of fine iron showed a slight dent. Kale, are you okay? Fry decisively gave up on opening the door, wiped his cold sweat and shouted. Kale's calm and steady voice quickly came out from the door. I'm fine, you just stay outside the office, don't let other soldiers in. Okay. Fry nodded in response, and he was not worried about whether Kale was in danger. This was completely unnecessary. What he should be worried about was the person who was fighting with Kale. In fact, this was indeed the case. At this time, inside the battleship's office, wood shavings and paper were scattered all over the floor, full of raging traces left behind by fierce fighting. Except for the venom suit, Kale, who was not equipped with any other equipment, stood straight in the middle of the office, coldly looking at Satana, who was half sitting and half lying on the iron door in front of him. The current Satana was like a completely different person from before. Her young and tender face was filled with indifference, and her beautiful eyes were filled with a sharp cold light. The white military doctor's dress on her body was like a beggar's dress that covered her petite body, and she looked extremely miserable with sweat and dust stuck to her body. It was a one-sided crushing situation. What? The top agents trained by the Soviet Union only have this much ability. I haven't even used my full strength yet, and you're already prepared to fall? Kale sneered coldly. Satana clenched her teeth and endured the pain from the wounds on her body. She struggled to support herself against the iron door and slowly got up. Not bad. Kale revealed a devilish smile. Just now, he had used 80% of his strength to land a few punches and kicks on his opponent's body. An ordinary person would have been beaten to death long ago, but now Satana still had the ability to fight. The immune system and resistance of a super agent were not as simple as they seemed. I'll let you make the first move. Kale shrugged. Satana did not hesitate. She knew that she could not escape in the territory of another army. She could only fight to the death. She lowered her body slightly and rushed forward. When she was 2 meters away from Kale's body, she turned her right palm and stretched out a broken piece of wood that she had been hiding. The broken piece of wood whistled through the air and quickly pierced toward Kale's eyes. Kale seemed to have known this would happen. He quickly reached out with his left hand and grabbed the wrist of the right hand that was holding the wooden stick. His 5 fingers squeezed hard, and the bones in the girl's wrist cracked as if they were about to break. Ah, let go of me. Satana shouted in pain and quickly kicked her left calf toward Kale's lower body. The next moment, her left ankle was also caught halfway by Kale's other hand and firmly held in the palm of his hand. This was a complete counter to every move. With a huge gap in combat skills and physical fitness, Satana was like a kitten showing its fangs to Kale, a cheetah. Captain America Steve was completely defeated by Kale in pure close combat. Not to mention that Satana's combat strength was less than half of Steve's. If Steve was at the level of Kale's younger brother, then Satana was the younger brother's younger sister. She had no chance of winning at all. Boring. Kale looked coldly at Satana, who was imprisoned by him and could not move, and shook his head in disappointment. He grabbed the other's petite body with both hands, bent his left leg and raised it, and heavily hit the girl's soft stomach with his knee. This blow was a full-force knee strike. Satana, who wanted to resist, rolled her eyes and completely lost the ability to fight. Kale also let go of his hands and let her twitch and curl up on the ground. The short battle quickly came to an end. "Fry, you can come in." Kale patted the dust on his hands and called out. The iron door was quickly opened by Fraser, who acted as the guard. He walked into the room and was shocked when he saw the messy office and Satana, who was curled up on the ground with bruises all over her body. "The Soviet Union is really restless. They sent agents to secretly take my blood," Kale said expressionlessly. "Then what should we do with her? Lock her up or hand her over to the higher-ups?" Fry asked. "Keep this matter a secret for the time being and wait until the end of this battle. It's not good for our army to be in a deadlock with the Soviet Union now." After Kale finished speaking, he picked up the general's coat and put it back on. He glanced at Satana on the ground and said, "Send her to a single room on the battleship and lock her up. Send a female military doctor to help deal with her injuries and change her into a military combat uniform. I have something to ask her later." "Later?" Fry stared at Satana, who was still twitching on the ground. "She wouldn't be able to recover in a few days, right?" Kale shrugged and said, "I didn't kill her. With her physical fitness, she should wake up in half an hour." Fury shook his head and gave a serious comment, "The target of the mission is you. Whoever comes will be the one who ends up dead. This debt isn't settled yet. If there's a chance in the future, I'll go and take care of the Red Room organization," Kale said coldly. "Since they wanted to use him as an experimental abacus, then sorry, I'll make a note of it in the little book of death." An hour later, Satana gradually woke up in an isolated single room. As soon as she woke up, the wounds on her body caused a burst of pain. She looked around calmly and found that her body was tied to a wooden chair. Her hands and feet were tightly wrapped with ropes. The tattered white dress on her body had already been replaced with a small American green combat uniform. The strong ropes on her body were indeed confining for ordinary people, but for Satana, this was just a small trick to fix her body. She could easily break free with her flexibility. However, apart from the ropes on her body, Satana could also feel a cold metal round neck tightly wrapped around her neck. "I advise you not to make a futile struggle. The thing on your neck is the electric shock collar that I asked Howard to make before. As long as you want to remove it or press the button of the remote control, it will work. The maximum electric shock is enough to make a cow incontinent." A cold and calm voice sounded from the door. Kale slowly walked into the detention room as he spoke. The electric shock collar was originally prepared for the future to deal with the winter soldiers. He didn't expect to use it here first. Chapter 62. After listening to Kale's warning, Satana bit her lower lip lightly and lowered her head. She no longer had any thoughts of resisting. This was not because of the threat of the electric shock collar on her body, but because of the pressure from Kale's powerful strength. After personally fighting once, Satana, who was proficient in tactical analysis, knew very well that the young man in front of her was undoubtedly standing at the peak of the world's combat power level. He was a mountain that was difficult to surpass. "I like to talk to smart people." Kale smiled faintly and closed the door. He sat on the chair on the other side of the table in front of Satana. Satana said as if a broken jar had been broken, "No matter how you deal with me, I won't say anything about the Red Room." Speaking of the Red Room, there was a hint of fear in her eyes and on her small face. "That's good. I happen to have no interest in the Red Room organization. Anyway, one day I'll go there and flatten it." Kale smiled carelessly. His fingers tapped on the table lightly and he said calmly, "I'm more interested in you, so I'll only ask you some personal questions that are not related to the organization." As he said this, his mind focused on the blue ability card on Satana. Super Agent, current status, can be drawn. Cannot be used at the same time as the Super Soldier ability. Can be drawn and can't be used at the same time. Isn't this contradictory? Kale had such doubts when he first saw the card on Satana. However, Satana was the only person he saw with a blue ability card so far. The Super Soldier was a special ability card with a rare prefix. The rare grade of the blue card also had a restriction that it could only be drawn once. What would happen if he drew a blue ability card that could not be used? Kale had come for this experiment. While he was concentrating, he immediately drew the blue ability card on the Super Agent. The blue ability card also required him to keep it within a 1-meter radius and read it continuously for 30 minutes. Beginning card draw, 1799, 1798. The long countdown began. Kale also took advantage of this time to talk to Satana. The Red Room organization should have already given you my information in detail. I won't introduce myself here. You, on the other hand, introduce yourself first. Satana replied coldly, don't you have my file as well? My name is Satana Caroline. I don't think that a Soviet agent would use his real name to infiltrate the country. Kale smiled faintly. Seeing that Satana was still ignoring him, he leisurely fished out a small remote control from the pocket of his general's coat. This question doesn't involve the Red Room organization. If you don't even cooperate with a basic question and answer, do you want to taste the electric shock first? Incontinence is very disgusting. You demon. Satana glared fiercely at Kale. Her gaze wandered around the remote control. She quickly gritted her teeth and said, I'll say it, okay? My real name is Natasha Romanoff. Then what's your code name in the Red Room organization? Kale continued to ask. Didn't you say that you won't ask about the Red Room organization? I've already told you my real name. What's there to hide about my code name? You bastard. Natasha thought for a long time and finally spat out a hateful adjective. She was now just a Soviet Red Room agent who had been training for a few years. No matter how much brainwashing and extreme training, it couldn't hide the foundation of a 16-year-old underage girl. How could she beat a wily old fox like Kale by purely playing tricks and tricks? Natasha pouted dejectedly. Codename, Black Widow. Black Widow? I didn't expect you to get married so early. You don't even have a husband. It's quite pitiful. Kale teased. Natasha shook her head in protest. Bastard. Black Widow is a type of poisonous spider. Not a widow. I know, Black Widow. Kale nodded as if he understood. He had guessed it before, but he didn't expect it to be her. Black Widow Natasha, one of the founding heroes of the Avengers in the future. Although her combat power was at the bottom level, she often played a key role in certain war situations. She was also a famous social butterfly among the heroes in the world of Marvel. Now her code name was Black Widow, but in the future she would also be a widow who brings misfortune to her husband. A black rose with thorns. Kale thought for a while and couldn't help but ask, Natasha, why did you join the Red Room organization in the first place? Do you still need to ask? Of course, to become a top expert. Natasha snorted coldly. She had lost her parents in the war when she was young and had long abandoned the weak and powerless identity of a young girl. As far as I know, the Soviet Red Room would implant virtual memories in the new members to brainwash them in order to make them loyal to the organization. Kale smiled and guided her. Do you often feel that your memories from the past are incomplete, or don't match up? Or are there twists and turns in your memories? Natasha was silent. No one knew what she was thinking. Think about it carefully. While the Red Room makes you stronger, it also makes you into a killing machine that loses your sense of self. After Kale finished speaking, his attention returned to the blue card that he had been drawing. 3, 2, 1, draw successful. The countdown ended. A glowing blue ability card appeared in the card space out of thin air. But unlike the previous ability cards, this card seemed to be rejected by the collective ability card. It couldn't enhance the external body and the card was forced to retreat to the edge of the blank area. Kyle's mind entered the card space, and he reached out to take the blue ability card to examine it. Super Agent. Current status. Unable to be used with Super Soldier at the same time. Can be given to others. Warning of the card. 2 ability cards of the same type cannot exist in the card space at the same time, except for, add life. Every time an ability card of blue or above is given, it will enter a cooldown period of 3 days. Each person can only be given 1 ability card of blue or above quality and cannot choose to withdraw it. It can only be destroyed within 3 meters. Can it be given to others? Kale's heart skipped a beat. He unexpectedly discovered the third function of the card other than card drawing and card sacrifice. Giving cards. After drawing an ability card that he couldn't use, he could give it to others. What did this mean? It meant that as long as there was someone like Natasha who had the original blue ability card, giving the card ability could cultivate a group of forces with the same blue ability card in enough time. Kale looked at Natasha in front of him with bright eyes. For the preparation of his future forces and for his own selfish reasons, he secretly made a choice. Chapter 63. If it was said that reading and sacrificing cards could allow a person's strength to increase rapidly, and even become stronger when facing a strong opponent, then the third brand new ability to draw cards could cover a team's forces with this characteristic. This way, after the Second World War, the plan to cultivate the family's forces can be improved by a big step. When Kale thought of this, the excitement in his heart could not be calmed for a long time. Previously, even if there was a plan to cultivate forces, it was only the giant ancient dragon Turtle Island as the embryo of the territory. Only the ability to draw cards could truly be considered the foundation of the creation of a family. Natasha, who was tied up, realized that Kale's gaze on her was becoming more and more strange. She could not help but bite her lips and turn her face away. Men are all animals who think with their lower bodies. Even the American heroes are no exception. I won't end my life here, Natasha quietly sized up her surroundings. The cold and narrow interrogation room, and she was tied up with a rope and a collar. What are you observing? I told you, don't even think about escaping. Kale snapped out of his thoughts of the future blueprint and looked at Natasha, whose head was spinning non-stop, and said coldly. Natasha's pretty face was slightly unwilling as she complained in a low voice. You can do that, but can you untie me first? That way everyone can feel more comfortable. Comfortable? What nonsense is this? Kale glared at her coldly and then said gently, Natasha, is your dream only to become stronger? If I can make you stronger, then do you still want to go back to the Red Room organization? You want to instigate me? Natasha's eyes were messy and she directly refused. It's not up to me to choose whether to go back to the Red Room or not. If I betray the organization, they will also send agents to kill me. If you join my side, you won't be afraid of a mere Red Room organization. Kale snorted coldly, but he also fell silent and fell into deep thought. Right now his words were not very persuasive. No matter how strong he was, it would be difficult for him to fight against the elite secret service of a superpower. Moreover, although he was a major general of the United States, the human resources in his hands were basically from the country. He did not have a trump card that could make Natasha betray the Red Room organization, so this conversation would have to wait. You should think about it on your own. I can't promise much now, but from now on I can at least guarantee your personal safety, Kyle said as he stood up from the chair. He pulled out the sodium carbon steel sword from his back and slashed forward. In the next moment, the ropes around Natasha's waist were broken and fell to the ground. In the future you will, Natasha's words, Natasha, 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 Natasha. Natasha hurriedly said, at least take off the collar around my neck. Just stay here. I will have someone bring you food regularly. Don't even think about escaping. Kale shrugged. He had already walked out of the door and locked it behind him. If she wanted to escape, he could send an American army to guard her. She would probably be able to escape. However, if she really wanted to leave the Red Room, then she would silently accept that she was locked up in a state where she could not escape. This game was also a little psychological trick. The warship was about to set sail. Kale planned to slowly deal with this matter after the battle. He's really leaving? Natasha, who was left alone in the interrogation room, sat in the chair, feeling depressed. She tilted her head and thought about Kale's suggestion. Betray the Red Room and join his side? No matter how I look at it, this is the worst choice. Natasha scratched her head in annoyance. She simply didn't want to think about it anymore and just lay on the table. Many years later, Natasha, who was also the spokesperson of a top family and the deputy director of SHLD, would say this to the media when she visited. No one, not even I, could have imagined that the most important turning point in my life was actually being a captive with a collar around my neck. On the deck of the battleship, the scorching noon sun shone directly on it. Thousands of American soldiers in combat uniforms and holding guns lined up neatly. Their gazes were all focused on a cold-looking young man in a general's uniform. The anchor has been raised. All naval sailors on the battleship are in position. The captain and deputy captain are ready in the control room. All combat soldiers are ready. Get ready for battle. Fry finished his report and put down the communicator in his hand. He saluted the young man by the railing at the bow of the ship. It's almost time to depart. Major General Kale, please give the order. Kale nodded and looked at the vast and boundless sea. He said coldly, then depart. Target, the coast of Normandy. Roger. Fry nodded and immediately contacted the other side of the communicator. Soon, the battleship took the lead and officially set sail as the vanguard of the battleship. It broke through the waves and moved straight ahead. At the same time, the hundreds of other battleships anchored around it also set sail. They majestically broke through the waves and covered several miles of sea area. In addition to the turbulent waves on the sea, thousands of fighter jets were like a swarm of bees leaving their hive. They densely occupied the air territory and moved almost in the same direction. This time, the alliance of the three countries invested more than 2 million soldiers. There were countless weapons and ammunition. One could imagine how tragic the upcoming landing battle would be. Kale, who was standing at the bow of the battleship, also took off the general's coat on his body, completely revealing the integrated black venom suit. He had a sodium-carbon steel sword on his back, and his right palm and arm were completely covered by the cold vibranium arm guard. The dual-energy pistols were equipped on the calf side of the suit, and the new gravity magnet equipment was equipped on his belt. He was fully armed. Fry touched Kale's side and whispered, "Kale, don't rush so fiercely this time. You're a major general, the commander of the enemy's focus fire." Kale smiled and said, "Well, aren't you in charge of the rear command of the army I lead?" "I'm worried." Before he finished speaking, Fry admitted that he had said something wrong and helplessly spread out his hands. Kale was really not the person he should be worried about. After all, he had never been an officer on paper but a real super soldier on the battlefield. Fry explained, "After our battleship arrives at the opposite coast, the Alliance army will be divided into 5 armies and land on the beach respectively. The battleship and the battle machine will cooperate with us to suppress the enemy's tanks and fortresses. The army will keep attacking forward, occupy all the places they go, clear out the enemy, and completely liberate France occupied by the German army first. You just need to give me a direction and range of attack," Kale said coldly. Chapter 64. France's Gold Coast, one of the 5 key beaches. The sand on the Gold Coast was very fine, so it shone like gold under the sun. Paired with the coconut trees on the beach, it was a good tourist attraction. At this time, the sun was setting in the west on the Gold Coast. Only the red sunset was left in the sky, indicating that the long night was coming. On the coastline, countless sandbags were placed about 100 meters on the shore to form a defensive line. Tens of thousands of German soldiers wearing steel helmets were stationed here, only showing off their heavy machine guns. They all held their breaths solemnly, their faces tense. No one spoke. It was so quiet on the shore that only the sound of the sea breeze and waves could be heard. It was like the calm before a storm, calm but full of hidden murderous intent. "Our elite tank unit hasn't arrived from the rear yet?" A general-rank German officer asked the correspondent next to him in a low voice. The correspondent quickly responded, reporting, "The rear troops said that they were bombed by the enemy fighter jets from the 3 countries' alliance. Their movements are limited and they can't reach the coastal defense line in time. These damned allies. Tell them to defend the coastal defense line to the death. Kill all the enemy troops that land on the beach. No matter what, we have to hold on until the rear tanks arrive." Before the German officer finished his order, he saw the correspondent staring at the sea outside the sandbags in shock. His young face was pale and filled with fear. The German officer immediately raised his head and looked in the direction of his gaze. He saw that on the surface of the sea where the sky had darkened, dozens of huge warships vaguely appeared, covering the entire sea area. The leading battleship was like a steel monster heading straight for the beach. "They're here. They're here." Kacha. For a moment, the sound of countless German soldiers taking a deep breath and then loading their weapons rang out on the coastal defense line. The large-scale battle to snatch the land had officially begun. First, it was the long-range artillery attack from the Allies. The muzzles of the battleships and warships were aimed at the shore of the beach. Under the concentrated artillery fire, they launched an indiscriminate destructive bombardment. Under the full firepower, the nearby area of the beach and the sky were illuminated. At this time, near the Gold Coast, the battleship was the first to stop on the sea surface. The surrounding warships also stopped. If they continued forward, the depth of the sea would not be enough for the warships to travel. However, the purpose of investing so many warships was not to be used as the main weapon to destroy the enemy's defense. Instead, it was used as a means of transportation to transport soldiers and provide cover for large-scale combat troops to land on the beach. As soon as the dozens of warships docked, an endless stream of Alliance soldiers entered the sea. Through the hundreds of small boats, they landed on the beach and attacked. As soon as the Alliance soldiers stepped onto the beach of the Gold Coast, the machine guns of the German defense fortress were all activated in an instant. The barrage of bullets turned the beach into a forbidden zone for life. The Alliance soldiers could only rely on their physical bodies to continue forward. Blood dyed the coastal waters and the beach red. The battle to land on the beach had just begun, and it was already a war of attrition where human lives were as insignificant as ants. Where's Kale? On the deck of the battleship, Fry looked around and realized that Kale was nowhere to be seen when he ordered the troops to seize the beach. "Fry. A cold and calm voice suddenly came from the highest observation deck of the battleship. Fury raised his head in the direction of the voice and looked up at the edge of the observation deck. Care stood tall and straight in his black battle suit. "I'll leave the rear command to you." After Kale finished speaking, he jumped down from the observation deck that was 50 meters above the deck and nearly 100 meters above the sea. Under Frey's horrified gaze, Kale, who jumped down from a high place, suddenly stretched out a pair of demon-like wings on the back of his black battle suit. He suddenly fell from a free fall and quickly glided towards the beach. Venom Battle Suit Wing Form. This was the form transformation ability unlocked by Venom after symbiosis with the Blue Eagle. Unfortunately, Venom's growth was not enough and could not fly with the transformed wings, but it was more than enough to glide at high altitude. Kale swooped and glided at high altitude, quickly crossing the shallow sea and the beach where the rain of bullets intersected, and quietly broke into the air 10 meters above the German defense fortress. Looking down at the dense enemy group below indifferently, Kale canceled the wing form of the battle suit and fell down. When he was in the air, his left hand reached for his waist and threw down a piece of anti-magnetic material. The moment the anti-magnetic material landed, the gravity field with a radius of 20 meters doubled. The German soldiers in the range suddenly staggered and fell to the ground in discomfort. At the same time, Kale also landed on the ground and rolled on the soft beach to relieve the force. His left hand was already holding the sodium carbon steel sword in his hand. He stood up like a beast and rushed to the machine gun that was still spitting out blue flames. With a raise of his hand, the German gunman and the machine gun in his hands were cut in half in an instant. Enemy! The German soldiers in the gravity field area struggled to get up. As soon as they raised their guns, they saw Kale bathed in the blood of his companions under the night sky, rushing towards them with a long sword dripping with blood in his hand. Da-da! Countless bullets fell on Kale's Venom battle suit that was enough to defend against ordinary bullets, but they were all bounced off. When they fell on his right arm that was blocking his head, not even a spark or sound could be heard. "Venom, cover the whole body," Kale whispered in a low voice. The next moment, Venom's black silk quickly covered his face and head above his neck, forming a ferocious black hood that looked like a demon. In this way, Venom was completely like an integrated battle suit, covering Kale's entire body, making him look more like a human-shaped demon. Covering the whole body was the true fusion of Venom and its host. The strength of the two could fuse into one without any hindrance. Although the strength and speed did not increase by much, it could be used more smoothly and perfectly. The reason why Kale didn't want to cover his whole body was because he would be addicted to war and killing. He would be cold and ruthless, without the slightest bit of human compassion on the outside and inside. But now, under the siege of the enemy and the rain of bullets, only he who was covered in the Venom battle suit could exert his combat power to the extreme. Kale indifferently lowered his right arm, allowing the bullets to fall on his ferocious hood. He rushed into the enemy group with his sword and slashed horizontally, or used the Venom battle suit to blow away the bodies of the soldiers, constantly reaping the lives of the enemy soldiers who were struggling to resist. In just 10 seconds, within the range of the anti-magnetic gravity enhancement, dozens of well-equipped German soldiers turned into broken corpses and fell in a pool of blood. Chapter 65. Late at night, the sun had completely sunk below the horizon. Darkness shrouded the streets of the city on the French coast like a black fog. Bang, da-da-da. The frontline defense line on the beach had long collapsed. Continuous artillery fire and gunfire continued to cover the area within a radius of more than 10 miles. The Allied forces of the three countries attacked with all their might, and the German soldiers resisted with all their might. Both sides were in a mess, and powerful gunfire continuously lit up the night, illuminating the bloody scene on the ground that was like hell. Countless corpses and wreckage covered the ground. Broken helmets, empty magazines, guns and empty bullet shells were scattered all over the ground. Blood dripped and gathered together. It was really like a bloody rain. At this time the war was not over yet. It had just begun. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night full of killing and smoke. It was also an unprecedented battle that the people of the major countries did not want to recall in the future. At this time, at the edge of the city street. Devil. He's a devil. Retreat, all of you retreat. Unlike other areas of the war where the soldiers of both sides were in a stalemate, the situation here was completely one-sided. More than a dozen well-armed German soldiers ran for their lives with pale faces in fear. Not far behind them, in the dark alley of the street, a tall and strong humanoid monster slowly followed them step by step with a bloody one-handed sword. The humanoid monster seemed to be covered in a layer of dark keratin membrane. The perfect outline of muscles was like an assembly line. If not for the illumination of artillery fire, it would have blended into the night. Scarlet slender eyes, ferocious and terrifying fangs, and a wild physique. This was the original form of Kale's body under the symbiotic relationship with Venom. In the alley behind him, more than a dozen corpses of soldiers were cut in half. Fresh blood was still spilling out and washing the floor. Grenades. Throw a grenade at him. The German officer at the head of the team shouted in horror. The rest of the soldiers immediately threw all the grenades they had. Boom boom boom. The explosions caused by the grenades formed a series of explosions, completely sealing off half of the street. The surrounding collapsed houses blocked Kale's figure. Phew. The German officer breathed a sigh of relief. His legs were weak and numb as he sat on the ground. He laughed to vent his fear. Aha, that monster is dead. Finally dead. His words came to an abrupt halt. He did not know when, but a bone-piercing chill came from behind him. The shadow cast by the tall figure enveloped his body. Captain, behind you. The rest of the German soldiers looked behind the officer as if they had seen the scariest thing in their lives. They couldn't help but tremble as they retreated. The German officer quickly stood up. He didn't even have the strength to turn around. His teeth were chattering as he said hoarsely, "Fire, continue fire, Pucci." The sharp one-handed sword fell from above and easily pierced through the German officer's head. Captain? More than a dozen German soldiers roared with tears in their eyes. Their grief and indignation turned into courage, and they overcame their fear and fired at the shadow behind the German officer's corpse. In the next moment, the dense rain of bullets hit the black shadows and fell to the ground, indicating how futile their final counterattack was. Ta-ta. After removing the one-handed sword from the head, Kale used the Venom suit to withstand the dense rain of bullets. He leaned forward and sprinted to close the distance between him and the enemy. He swung his sword horizontally, and the soldiers fell to the ground one after another like wheat harvested in a wheat field. The battle situation in this small area quickly returned to its original silence. Kale did not know how many enemy soldiers he had killed. It was meaningless. He was addicted to such a murderous night, and his body was still in a state of high excitement. Kale silently glanced at the enemy's corpses. He was about to move deeper into the battlefield when he suddenly saw a scene in the street in the distance from the corner of his eyes. He immediately stopped in his tracks. Less than 100 meters away, there was also a group of about 10 German soldiers on the street. They were engaged in a fierce exchange of fire with an enemy. The man was still struggling to resist with his gun, but he quickly threw away the gun in his hand and rushed to the group of German soldiers as if he was not afraid of death. Like a lone wolf hunting its prey, the man rushed forward in the face of the bullets. He held a claw-like cold weapon in his hand and made a desperate gesture. It was unknown whether it was courage or stupidity. He rushed to the muzzles of 10 fully loaded guns without any protection. The result could be imagined. Kale looked at the scene coldly. He wanted to leave, but in the next moment, the reversal of the 1-against-10 battle made his body and mind tremble. Not only did the man not die under the muzzle of the gun, but he also successfully broke into the German soldiers. The claw weapon in his hand quickly reaped the lives of the soldiers. Blood splattered everywhere. The killing speed was faster than his. Almost in the blink of an eye, the 10 German soldiers in his field of vision had fallen to the ground dead. He could only see the man standing alone at the scene and quickly disappearing into the night. The hood of the Venom suit turned into black silk and fell off, revealing Kale's handsome face. At this moment, his eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. It can't be him, can it? How is this possible? This is the world of the Marvel movies, the world of the Avengers. How could that person exist? Kale didn't hesitate at all. He immediately sprinted and rushed towards that place at an extremely fast speed. In a few seconds, Kale arrived at the scene of the battle just now. He quickly looked around to confirm, but there were only 10 broken corpses lying in a pool of blood on the ground. The lone wolf-like man was nowhere to be seen. Kale checked the fatal wounds on the bodies of the German soldiers one by one. Most of them were on the neck and chest. There were 3 claw marks deep into the white bones. It was basically a clean kill. His mind swayed and he found it difficult to calm down. Is it really that person? Kale fell into deep thought. Soon he seemed to have noticed something. He turned around sharply and looked at the corner of the alley next to the street. In the dark corner of the night, a middle-aged man wearing a Soviet soldier's combat uniform walked out indifferently. He leaned against the corner of the alley, took out a cigarette and lighter from his pocket, and slowly lit them for himself. He had a cool head of short black hair and a beard on his chin that covered both sides of his face. His face was rough and masculine, but it was very attractive. Chapter 66. If Cale was asked about his favorite hero in the entire The Avengers universe in his previous life, he might not be able to answer immediately. But if he was asked about his favorite character in the entire Marvel movies, it would definitely be Uncle Wolf. Uncle Wolf? At this time, looking at the old man smoking a cigarette in the corner, Cale could not help but speak. He never thought that he would meet the man in front of him in this battle. Who are you? The old man glanced at him in surprise. Cale took a deep breath and introduced himself. My name is Cale, a Major General Officer of the U.S. Army. Major General Officer. With such a high rank, why would you appear alone on the battlefield behind enemy lines? The old man looked at Cale suspiciously, as if he had never heard of the legend of the American hero. He asked again, how old are you? 23, almost 24. Cale shrugged and took a step forward. When he was completely within 3 meters of the old man, the information of the old man's ability cards suddenly became clear. Canadian language proficiency, Soviet language proficiency, yoga proficiency, true assassination proficiency, true rifle proficiency, true close combat proficiency, true ancient martial arts proficiency, true two-blade sect proficiency. At a glance, it was impossible to count how many white and green cards there were. Just based on the estimation of the green combat skill cards, there were at least hundreds of them. Even if Cale kept collecting them in the U.S. Army, covering hundreds of thousands of soldiers and officers, there were only 30 or so cards. What did it mean to have more than 100 green combat skill cards? It meant that he was almost proficient in most of the combat skills on Earth. This also indirectly expressed how much cruel battle experience the man in front of him had experienced to be able to exchange for such a set of combat skills. Not only that, Cale's gaze finally locked on the old man's body, the dark blue and light blue ability cards. Lone Wolf Gene. Genetic mutation leads to a mutated physique and temperament like a lone wolf. Blue rare ability card. However, 3 sharp bone claws extended from his hands and fingers respectively. The claws were connected to the bones of his arms, and they were tough and sharp. The human body was inclined towards the nature of a wolf and obtained the innate abilities of a wolf. The wolf's strength and speed were increased, and the body's reflexes were as sharp as a wild beast's. The eyes were sharp and the nose had a keen sense of smell. The human body was naturally warlike and was used to being alone, killing and hunting prey. Due to the innate nature of lone wolves, they were naturally solitary and were not used to living in groups. When their wild nature went berserk, they would uncontrollably start killing. Current status: rare blue, prefix restriction, cannot be drawn. In terms of lethality, Lone Wolf's constitution was far superior to Super Soldier's constitution. This was the evaluation that Cale gave after looking at the rare blue-colored ability card of the Lone Wolf gene. His Super Soldier was the foundation of a human being, increasing his physique in all aspects. On the other hand, the Lone Wolf gene was inclined towards the extreme of wildness of a wolf. The former was stable while the latter was more aggressive. It was one thing to have such a perverted, Lone Wolf's physique card, but the weathered uncle had another one. Self-healing factor. A self-healing factor that exists in the human body. Blue ability card. The self-healing factor followed the blood and circulated throughout the body at all times. It adhered to the bone marrow and could not be removed. It even existed in every modified gene cell of the living body. All self-inflicted injuries could be healed naturally and quickly with the help of the self-healing factor. Even life-threatening injuries could be healed within half a day. Although sodium carbon steel could suppress the self-healing factor, it could only suppress it. Injuries could still be healed with enough time. The self-healing factor would infinitely slow down the aging of the body and extend the lifespan. Current status: can be drawn. Can be used at the same time as a physique strengthening ability. Lone Wolf gene self-healing factor. Is it really the Steel Wolf? If it's not him, who else would have such a perverted and extreme physique? Cale was shocked, but his face remained calm. He looked at the weathered uncle and said, I've already introduced myself. What about you, uncle? I'm just a soldier from the Soviet Army. There's nothing to introduce. The weathered uncle waved his hand and said that. He threw the cigarette butt on the ground and was about to leave alone. He still did not quite believe that Cale was an American major general or something. Even if he was, it had nothing to do with him. Wait a minute. Cale opened his mouth to ask him to stay, but the weathered uncle sped up and left at the end of the street. Cale narrowed his eyes and also sped up to follow behind. He didn't want to miss this opportunity. There were no mutants in this world. This was what he learned at the training base before. But now he met a man suspected to be Wolverine. How could he not be surprised? How annoying. The weathered uncle ran and glanced behind him at Kale, who was following closely. He couldn't help but speed up. His speed quickly exceeded the running speed of an ordinary person. But soon he found that Kale was still following closely behind him. He couldn't get rid of him no matter how hard he tried. What do you want? Do you want me to attack you? The weathered uncle stopped, turned around, and said coldly. Just you alone? Don't you have any comrades or brothers on the battlefield with you? Kale looked around to confirm. Until now he hadn't seen anyone else. If the person in front of him was really the Wolverine he knew, then where was his big brother, saber-toothed tiger? The weathered uncle snorted coldly. No comrades can match me. Brothers? I've never had any brothers. No brothers? Kale frowned. The man didn't look like he was lying. This was really an uncle who was like a lone wolf. Kale thought for a while and reached into the holster of the energy pistol. Just as the weathered uncle's eyes became alert, he materialized a box of cigarettes and threw it over. Seeing that you've finished your cigarettes, I'll give you a pack. The weathered uncle quickly took the cigarettes, glanced at the cover of the box, and nodded slightly with satisfaction. American brand, not bad. He looked at Kale again and his face softened a little. Tell me, why are you following me? You look like a friend of mine in the past. Please tell me your name. If I know, I won't follow you anymore, Kale said urgently. If you're an American, then you can't have seen me. I've never been to America, the weathered uncle said as he walked away. He turned around and walked away. He waved his hand and said, My name is Logan Streep. Live well. We'll meet again after the battle. His lone wolf-like figure quickly disappeared into the dark night of the war-zone streets, never to be seen again. Logan Steele. Even his surname is different. Kale stood in the same place and muttered to himself. His eyes were filled with complicated emotions. He now understood that the man wasn't the Wolverine he knew, but someone similar to him in this Marvel parallel world. Chapter 67. The day gradually dawned. When the first ray of sun shone down from the Gold Coast, the nightmarish night at the edge of France gradually dissipated. At this time, the Gold Coast had completely fallen into ruins after the baptism of war. Rotting corpses, gun shells, blood stains, and smoke from scorched earth could be seen everywhere. All of this covered a dozen square miles of land as an abandoned land of disaster. Countless corpses of soldiers were piled up into small mountains and burned. The air was filled with a foul stench and black smoke that made people nauseous. After a night, the large-scale battle that lasted more than 10 hours on the beach finally gave them a chance to catch a breather. The German troops on the 5 beaches and the edge of France had basically been cleared. Of course, the forceful assault on the beach by the Allied forces of the 3 countries had also resulted in heavy casualties. However, there was still an endless stream of Allied troops landing at the rear, replenishing the fresh blood of the troops that continued to fight. Thus, it seemed that the military strength of the Allied forces had not decreased, but increased instead. This was only the first day of the battle. The 3 countries had won a Pyrrhic victory. In the future they would continue to step up the pace of the battle. They would first completely invade France, clear out the German soldiers, and then break into Germany's territory. Early in the morning, most of the soldiers of the 3 countries rested in place and changed to new troops to attack and defend. Fry, whose first lieutenant uniform was covered in blood and stains, was very busy. As soon as he put down his rifle, he directed the troops under his lead to receive supplies and rest. On one hand, he had just finished his commanding position as a major general. On the other hand, he asked the correspondent soldiers for information about Kale. For one position he had to worry about 3 things. What, you said Major General Kale? He seemed to be at the forefront of the battle last night. I saw him last night too. Major General Kale is really too strong. He directly wiped out one of our combat teams. Yeah, every step he took killed a few soldiers. I don't know how many German soldiers saw him, but they all turned around and ran. He's too fast. I only saw a shadow pass by and couldn't catch up. Fry asked the American soldiers of different units. They all said similar words of worship and praise. He didn't get any specific information about his whereabouts. However, Fry was relieved to know that Kale was fine and had been fighting at the front line. Although he believed in Kale's strength, he still couldn't help but worry about his safety. This was probably the friendship of a true comrade. At this time, the border between the border of the French territory and the major cities was also the frontline area. There were very few troops from the Tri-Nation Alliance that had attacked this place. Not a single German soldier could be seen on the streets of the small town. It was as quiet as an empty city. The crisp sound of a lighter rang out. After the cigarette but was lit, the owner took a few deep breaths and exhaled a large cloud of white smoke. Logan sat alone on the rooftop of the third floor of an abandoned building, smoking a cigarette. There were 2 German-style rifles by his feet. They looked like they had been picked up or exchanged, and he didn't have the time to maintain them. For him, the guns were only used to hide the fact that he was an ordinary veteran. When it came to a real life-and-death situation, only the claws in his hands were more reliable. However, after living for more than half a century and facing countless life-and-death situations, he still lived alone like a curse. He was like a lone wolf that was unwilling to surrender to fate. After taking the last puff, Logan threw the cigarette on the ground and stepped on it to extinguish it. He took out a sharp military knife covered in leather from his pocket. Then he took off the Soviet combat uniform on his body, revealing his strong body. There was not a single scar on his bronze skin. As if he was used to it, Logan kept stabbing himself with the military knife with a calm expression. The bullets left in his body were picked out by the tip of the knife, and they rolled onto the rooftop balcony with blood dripping from them. In less than 5 seconds, the bullet holes healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Is this the main reason why you like to fight alone and say that no comrades are a match for you? A calm and powerful young male voice suddenly came from the building behind him. Logan stood up abruptly, holding the military knife in his hand. He looked at the source of the voice with the ferocity of a beast. He saw a young man in a black combat uniform standing on the rooftop of another building. "You followed me?" Logan asked coldly. His eyes were filled with cold, murderous intent. "It's not really following you. It's just that I killed the enemy all the way here and coincidentally saw you." Cale shrugged and said slowly, "You don't have to be so hostile towards me. We are now allies and we are the same type of people." As he said this, under Logan's shocked gaze, Cale accelerated forward a short distance. With a jumping force 4 times that of a normal person, he easily crossed the distance of a road and landed on the rooftop of the building Logan was on. Logan frowned and was silent for a moment before he commented, "Your physique is not that of a normal human. Otherwise, how could I become a major general at such a young age?" Cale said with a smile. He didn't say the truth. Although he didn't follow closely, he followed the bodies of the enemy soldiers killed by the claw marks all the way here. He persevered and chased after him not because the other party was Wolverine from the world of the Avengers. In fact, it didn't matter whether the other party was Wolverine or not. The important thing was that he had the self-healing ability that Cale dreamed of, as well as an extra 70 green combat skill cards. Super Soldier, plus the self-healing factor, and hundreds of green combat cards would allow Cale to perfectly reach the peak of human combat power. Who sent you here? A 5-star general of the UA? Or a scientist from some research lab? Logan coldly guarded against the approaching Cale. He clenched his hands into fists and 3 sharp bone claws emerged from his fists. "I said, I don't mean any harm." Cale spread his hands, but as soon as he took a step forward, Logan had already fully extended his white bone claws and confronted him from 5 meters away. Perhaps it was due to too many unbearable experiences, the man in front of him was too defensive. Cale frowned slightly and looked at Logan, who was like a lone wolf entering battle mode. For a moment he didn't know what to do. If he wanted to draw a blue ability card, he had to be within 1 meter of him and continuously read for half an hour. Originally, Cale wanted to show goodwill and let down Logan's guard. As a comrade, he wanted to enter within 1 meter of him and try to read the card. Now it seemed that it was too difficult to negotiate with Logan in this state. If the negotiation failed, then he could only try to fight. This was the last choice he had. Chapter 68. At dawn on the rooftop of the rooftop. A young man in a black combat uniform and a middle-aged man with a strong upper body were facing each other with a distance of 5 meters between them. The atmosphere was solemn and oppressive, and both of them could enter a state of death at any time. There was no need to talk about Kyle. He was a major general who had been promoted from the corpses of German soldiers. He was a war hero who symbolized strength and conquest. He was a meat grinder on the battlefield, a demon butcher. Logan, the Wolverine of this world, was a lone wolf who constantly experienced meeting and parting. From the moment he obtained the lone wolf gene and self-healing factor, he was destined to constantly experience the chaos of war in different eras. The confrontation between these two people with murderous auras filled the air on the rooftop with a faint smell of blood and a murderous aura. If I want to draw the self-healing factor card, do I really have to go to this step? Kale clenched his fists and every muscle in his body was tense. Facing a strong enemy like Wolverine, he didn't know if his heart was surging with fear or excitement. He held the slightly protruding sword hilt with his left hand and pulled the sharp and slender sodium carbon steel sword out of the sheath. In any case, this opportunity must not be missed. Although it would be safer to arrange for the army to assist in the capture of Logan after the end of the battle, the other party was likely to leave the battlefield early and find a chance to hide in other parts of the world. With an ability card in front of him, there was no reason to retreat because of fear of the risk of battle. Kale thought of this, and even his eyes were unprecedentedly firm and bright. His left hand tightly held the one-handed sword in his hand, and his right hand with the vibranium arm guard also clenched into a fist. Gulu gulu, Venom also expressed his joy. Without needing Kale's reminder, countless black threads were derived from the mark on the chest of the combat uniform and turned into a black hood to cover Kale's face. Come on. Logan growled, and his hands held the wolf-shaped sharp claws in front of him. All the hair on his body was about to explode. The innate sensitivity of a beast let him know that the young man in front of him was very dangerous. Even in half a century there were only one or two such strong enemies. But, almost at the same time, the two of them charged at each other. They were both good at attacking, so there was no reason for them to let the other have the initiative. In the blink of an eye, the two figures collided with each other at an extremely fast speed. Logan's sharp claws collided with Kale's vibranium arm guard on his right arm first. The wolf-shaped bony claws were at a disadvantage, and their momentum was reduced. Surprise flashed in Logan's eyes. Soon, he flipped his sharp claws with exquisite skill and scratched Kale's body with the surface of the vibranium arm guard. Kale reacted quickly and swung his sword to block the three sharp claws that were reaching for his chest. Then, the sodium carbon steel sword and the wolf-shaped claws collided in the air, making a series of crisp and sharp sounds. The two of them fought more and more fiercely. Sweat poured down, and slender sword marks and claw marks were left on the floor of the building from time to time. Logically speaking, with Logan's hundreds of combat techniques, Kale's super soldier constitution alone would not be enough to make up for the difference, and he would be at a disadvantage very quickly. However, with the Venom suit's full coverage of vitality and the vibranium arm guard's ability to restrain the aggressive claws, he was able to drag the fierce battle into a prolonged stalemate. This was also the situation Kale wanted to see. Fortunately, in this world, Logan's sharp claws and body bones had not yet fused with adamantium. Otherwise, the vibranium arm guard would not be able to gain any advantage at all. At this time, not to mention within a 1-meter range, even a half-meter range had been reached. Kale held his breath and used all his strength to fight with Logan. On the other hand, he began to focus on the opponent's ability card. He immediately considered drawing a blue ability card that wasn't a self-healing factor. Maintaining a channeling time of half an hour within a meter was completely impossible under the circumstances of the current battle, so he could only start with a rare combat-type ability card that could gradually make up for the difference in technique. True Combat Mastery. Perfect mastery of combat techniques with a strong killing nature. Rare green ability card. True Ancient Martial Combat Mastery. Perfect mastery of ancient and primitive combat techniques. Rare green ability card. Each card only required 3 minutes to read, and only a rare green combat mastery ability card could make Kale feel the obvious improvement in his techniques. Thud thud thud, Poochie. On the rooftop, Kale and Logan were entangled in a fierce battle. Every sword attack and claw could take the opponent's life, but they were all neutralized by the opponent's exquisite techniques. This was a battle between masters of combat techniques, countering each move as it came, integrating combat into the body to launch an attack. Coupled with the fact that both of them had physiques that surpassed ordinary people, under the flying dust, the two figures kept going back and forth in close combat, to the point that the roof was about to collapse. This battle lasted for more than 10 minutes, and when both sides started to get tired, it was also the easiest time to determine the winner. 3 sharp claws whistled through the air, splashing blood, and forcing a black figure to take a few steps back. Logan's face was flushed red, his eyes were filled with killing intent, and his outstretched wolf-shaped claws were stained with scarlet blood. Directly opposite him, Kale was panting heavily with his right palm covering his chest. Even his Venom suit had been smoothly torn apart, revealing 3 deep claw wounds. Sorry, although we're allies, you know my secret, so you must die here. Logan looked coldly at the tired and injured Kale, and after a short pause in the battle, his rapid breathing began to calm down. The self-healing factor is really lacking here. Kale shook his head helplessly. He had already expected this situation. During this period of battle, his skills had indeed been compensated by drawing cards, but compared to Logan's lone wolf gene and self-healing factor, even the super soldier's super endurance would not be able to withstand a battle of attrition. It's all over, Logan said, his wolf-shaped claws dripping with blood as he walked forward step by step coldly. Is it over? Then let's try it. Kale took a deep breath, ignoring the serious injuries on his body, and took the initiative to rush towards Logan with his sword, as if making a final resistance. Before the battle, he had already rehearsed this battle in his mind dozens of times, and was very clear that he had the most crucial trump card in his hand, the only trump card that could defeat Logan with unlimited self-healing ability. It was the sodium carbon steel sword in his left hand that could suppress the self-healing factor. During the fierce battle for more than 10 minutes, Kale's sodium carbon steel sword had been used to block the claws, and instead, he attacked with his right hand with the vibranium arm guard. He did not take the initiative to leave a trace of wound on Logan's body to let him notice, all for this moment. Chapter 69. On the rooftop, Kale, who was wounded in the chest, rushed into Logan's arms with a one-handed sword in his left hand. In everyone's eyes, it was a last-ditch effort. Logan looked ahead indifferently as if waiting for his prey to come to him. Relying on his lone wolf physique and self-healing ability, he had forced his enemies into a desperate situation many times over the past few decades. Lone wolves like this. When encountering a strong prey, he did not call for more companions to besiege him. Instead, he relied on his tenacious will and means to exhaust the opponent's physical strength, and then went on to kill the weak prey. In terms of offense, he had hundreds of fighting techniques and wolf-shaped claws. In terms of defense and physical strength, he had a strong beast's physique and self-healing factor. From Logan's point of view, Kyle's fate of death was already sealed the moment he made his move, because the one he was fighting wasn't a mere human, but a proud and aloof beast that was already riddled with scars. Tap tap. Looking at Kale who rushed in front of him, Logan, who had been standing still, suddenly moved. The sharp claws of both hands stretched out quickly and powerfully. In the blink of an eye, the claws pierced into the defenseless chest. Kale narrowed his eyes as if he did not notice the sharp claws at all, and continued to rush forward. Poochie. A pair of sharp claws completely sank into the cross mark of the venom suit, and Kale's body stopped abruptly. Just before his movements completely stopped, he used all the remaining strength in his body to pour into his left hand and also sent the one-handed sword into Logan's chest. Poochie. The sodium carbon steel sword smoothly pierced through Logan's chest, and the slight tip of the sword came out from his back with blood. Injury for injury, you are really cruel to yourself. Logan was stunned. He never thought that other than himself, there would be someone who would use such a suicidal way of fighting. Thank you for the compliment. If I don't treat myself harshly, how can I defeat a strong enemy like you? Kale smiled, dark red blood flowing out from the corner of his mouth. His left palm was still pressed against the hilt of the one-handed sword. He gently pushed it forward, and the two people who were locked in a stalemate retreated and separated. Blood splattered from their bodies. Cough cough. Kale's face was pale as he coughed up blood and sat on the floor. Just now, the 6 claws had pierced through his lungs. Venom anxiously extended the black silk to repair the battle suit to block the serious wound, but it could not stop the blood from gushing out. Logan, on the other hand, was lying on the ground. The sodium carbon steel sword was completely buried in his chest, revealing only the exquisite cross-shaped hilt. It looked as if he had been nailed to the ground by the sword. Both sides had suffered great losses. How should I put it? You're one of the most difficult opponents I've ever met. Logan panted and changed his words. If you take age into consideration, then there's no other. You too. To tell you the truth, I really don't want to fight a beast like you. Kale sat on the ground and responded weakly. This was the most difficult battle he had encountered since his rebirth and the most serious injury he had suffered. The battle with Steve was only a battle of friendship. The battle with Logan was a battle of life and death. It's a pity. You won the battle, but in the end, I'm still the one who survived. Logan said as if he was telling the truth. He retracted his wolf-shaped claws and reached out to pull out the one-handed sword on his chest. But soon, his face changed slightly as he found that he couldn't exert his strength. His usual rapid self-healing ability didn't work to heal the chest injury. Kale said softly, "Give up. That sword is made of sodium carbon steel, which specifically restrains the self-healing factor." Really? No wonder. It turned out that you had this plan for a long time. It seems that I didn't lose unjustly. Logan heard this and sighed thoughtfully. He let go of his hands and lay on the ground as if relieved of a burden. Can I ask what my fate is going to be? Are you going to take me back to the prison in the military base or send me to various research labs for experiments, or kill me on the spot? Logan said in a hoarse voice, as if he was used to being treated inhumanely by the crippled in his mouth. I won't do that. After all, we didn't have to come to this point. Cale got up with difficulty and walked slowly toward Logan. With his current injuries, he had to get the self-healing factor card as soon as possible. Actually, the purpose of fighting with Logan was only to draw the ability card. If they had negotiated well before, they could find a place to sit down and have a drink and chat. This was heaven and hell in a single thought. A simple choice instantly turned into a battle of life and death. Just as Cale was about to approach Logan, who was on the ground, he suddenly turned his head as if he felt something. His sharp gaze looked at the corner of the roof and his pupils contracted slightly. He didn't know when, but there was another tall and burly spectator on the roof where the two of them were fighting to the death. The man was a middle-aged man wearing a large German-style military uniform. His face was rough and overbearing, and his 2-meter-tall stalwart figure looked like a fierce tiger that was about to start a massacre. If it was any other day with Cale and Logan's sharp senses, they would have noticed that someone was approaching. However, because they were seriously engrossed in the fierce battle, they didn't notice that someone had quietly arrived on the roof. The man seemed to know Logan on the ground and said calmly and coldly, "Logan, I didn't think that you would fall to this point so quickly. I'm really disappointed." "It's you." Logan, who was lying on the ground and had given up resisting, suddenly widened his eyes when he heard this voice. He stared at the man with deep hatred. "This way I can easily take your life." The man smiled ferociously and clenched his fists. 2 sharp bone claws slowly extended from each of his hands. Saber-toothed tiger? Cale was a bit confused for a moment. He looked at the man and then looked at Logan. He couldn't help but ask Logan, "Didn't you say that you didn't have any brothers?" "Brothers? He is the enemy of my parents, my lover, and my son." Logan roared. If it weren't for his heavy injuries, he probably would have stood up and fought the saber-toothed tiger to the death. Likewise. I joined the German army for the arrival of this day. I just didn't think that it would come so quickly and so suddenly. The saber-toothed tiger smiled ferociously and ignored the heavily injured Cale. He kept rubbing his sharp claws and walked towards Logan, who was struggling to pull out his sword. In this world, the two of them were clearly not brothers, but were they still lifelong enemies? Cale quickly understood from the side and his face quickly turned cold. Logan hadn't drawn his self-healing card yet. How could he be killed by a saber-toothed tiger that had suddenly appeared? It looked like he couldn't avoid using his trump card when he needed to. Cale sighed inwardly and whistled towards the sky. The saber-toothed tiger immediately looked in their direction with surprise. In his eyes, the two of them were heavily injured and on the verge of death. They posed no threat at all. The saber-toothed tiger said in a low voice, "What do you want to do? Once I've taken care of Logan, I'll naturally send you to hell as well. The corpse of an American hero should be worth a lot of money in Germany." Cale's eyes were cold. Even though he was heavily injured, he still stood tall and straight. He directly said 3 words to the saber-toothed tiger, "You're thinking too much." Chapter 70. "You're thinking too much." Cale's tone was cold with a hint of mockery, which made the saber-toothed tiger's face darken on the spot. Its already fiery temper caused the veins on its forehead to stand out. Its voice was low and cold. "After I kill Logan, I'll use my sharp claws to open a hole in your stomach, pull out all your intestines and hang them on the rooftop to bleed." As it spoke, the saber-toothed tiger's ferocious gaze fell on Logan, who was on the ground. It roared and swooped down, wanting to finish off this enemy first. Cale looked on coldly from the side. His serious injuries were not enough for him to stop the tiger's actions, but he had already called for help in advance. Just as the saber-toothed tiger was about to leap over and its sharp claws were about to land on Logan's neck, a huge beast shadow fell from the sky with a hurricane. Its wings that blocked the sunlight flapped rapidly and powerfully, slapping the saber-toothed tiger that was still leaping into the air and sending it flying back. The saber-toothed tiger, which was as tall as a brown bear, was sent flying from the rooftop of the 3rd floor before it realized what was going on. It brushed against the guardrail and fell down the stairs. "Trying to snatch food from my mouth? I don't care if you're a saber-toothed tiger or a polar bear, you'd better stay aside." Cale sneered and looked at the blue eagle that was hovering a few meters above the rooftop. The blue eagle was nodding its head in his direction, as if it was also worried about his safety. "I'm fine," Kale said weakly. His expression changed slightly. The sound of sharp claws climbing the wall came from downstairs. The third floor was less than 10 meters high. It was indeed impossible to hurt the saber-toothed tiger that was stronger than Logan's lone wolf gene constitution. "Quick, take him away first." Kale waved his left hand and decisively gave the order to the blue eagle that was close to him. "Chirp!" The blue eagle cried softly and swooped down obediently. Its eagle claws grabbed Logan, who was lying on the ground and unable to move due to his serious injuries. Just as it was about to take Kale with it, the saber-toothed tiger climbed up the side of the building again. It growled and pounced at the low-flying blue eagle with its sharp claws. "Chirp!" The blue eagle let out a sorrowful cry as it was injured. More than 10 blue feathers with blood fell from its body. It flapped its wings and quickly flew away from the rooftop with Logan. "Damn it!" The saber-toothed tiger's eyes widened as it angrily cursed at the disappearing blue sky that the blue eagle had left behind. Then it looked towards Kale, who was still lingering in the middle of the balcony, and said hoarsely, "Does that giant bird beast listen to your orders? Tell it to come back and hand Logan to me, and I'll consider letting you go." Kale smiled faintly. His body was riddled with wounds, and the floor beneath his feet had already formed a pool of blood from his own blood. His life force was constantly declining, but he still slowly replied to the saber-toothed tiger, "You're thinking too much." He had always been the one who held the initiative to negotiate terms with others. He had never experienced being threatened before. "Ah, interesting. Then you're staying behind. Are you planning to sacrifice yourself?" The saber-toothed tiger laughed instead of being angry. It stretched out 2 sharp claws from its left hand and pressed them against the rooftop's protective wall. It easily tore through the bricks and dust, leaving 2 smooth claw marks. "I've long heard of you in Germany. America's Kale, nicknamed the Killing God and the Devil in the military, is one of the German military's top targets in the war." The saber-toothed tiger's eyes were slightly red and filled with savagery as it spoke. It stared straight at Kale and said coldly, "I wonder if a war hero will cry out weakly like a woman when he's about to die." "Sorry, you're really thinking too much," Kale said uninterestedly. His face was calm without a trace of panic. He unhurriedly spread out his right hand. A green bean lay quietly in the middle of his palm that was wrapped in vibrantly gold metal. No matter how one looked at it, it was just a normal green bean. However, it had a lush green vitality. One could vaguely feel the exuberant vitality and mysterious magic within it. This was one of the trump cards in the card space that could save one's life. Kale looked at the green bean with slight pity. He flipped his right hand slightly and sent the green bean into his mouth, which was still bleeding. Poison? Or some kind of stimulant? The saber-toothed tiger saw this scene and its broad and coarse face was slightly stunned. Under the keen senses of a wild beast, a bad premonition overflowed from the bottom of its heart. No matter what that green bean was, it couldn't let the other party eat it. The saber-toothed tiger made a judgment and immediately rushed towards Kale. It was like a ferocious tiger that was about to kill its prey, using its sharp claws to attack. Crunch, crunch. Kale didn't care about anything else. He crushed the green bean in his mouth and swallowed it along with the fishy blood. He looked at the sharp claws that were getting closer and closer to him, as if waiting for something. Plop, plop, plop. In Kale's originally severely injured and weak body, the weak and frail heart suddenly made a strong and powerful heartbeat sound. A mysterious force flowed through his body like a spring. The next moment, the recovery effect far exceeded the self-healing effect. In just the blink of an eye, the deep claw marks and all the injuries in the internal organs of the body were all healed as if they were never there. Even if a person was seriously injured or on the verge of death, one bean could restore the body to its peak state. This was the magical effect of the rare blue item card, Senza Bean. My strength is back. Kale opened his eyes wide and his blue eyes lit up. He looked at the saber-toothed tiger that was rushing in front of him and quickly raised his clenched right hand. He didn't admit defeat and just punched it. Bang! The right fist of the vibrantly gold metal arm guard against the sharp claws of the tiger-shaped bones. The saber-toothed tiger was completely stunned. It didn't expect that Kale, who seemed to be seriously injured and on the verge of death, would recover in the blink of an eye. What was worse was that when the claw with the greatest strength hit the vibranium arm guard, it was caught off guard and lost all its momentum. Get out of my way. Kale sneered and didn't give it a chance. He quickly raised his left foot and hit the abdomen of the saber-toothed tiger with his knee. Once again the saber-toothed tiger flew out like a large rubber ball. The saber-toothed tiger smashed the parapet of the rooftop and once again fell from the roof of the third floor, causing a cloud of dust to rise. When it got up with a low growl, it looked up and saw that Kale was standing tall and straight on the parapet of the rooftop, looking down coldly. "Are you sure you want to continue fighting with me?" Kale said condescendingly. The saber-toothed tiger clenched its fists and suppressed its anger so much that its face was livid. It didn't even respond to a word and turned away quickly. He thought that he was a little stronger than Logan, but even Logan was defeated by the other party. After repeatedly measuring each other's strength, he found that his chances of winning were basically zero. The main reason was that the other party was too strange and mysterious. A giant bird beast, a mysterious being, and a special equipment. His physique was not much worse than his. Chapter 71. Kyle stood alone on the roof of the building that had been through several fierce battles and was now in shambles. In his field of vision, the saber-toothed tiger's burly figure left in a sorry state, disappearing into the corner of the street. He did not have the intention to continue the chase. With such strength, persuading the saber-toothed tiger to retreat was the best outcome. The saber-toothed tiger's physique and strength were far superior to Logan's. But because of this, its speed was slightly clumsy, and its combat skills were far from Logan's rich and solid. Therefore, the vibranium armguard's restraining effect was even more obvious. But that was all. The sodium-carbon steel sword was still stuck in Logan's body that the Blue Eagle had taken away. Without the confidence and means to kill the saber-toothed tiger, Kale did not have the desire to continue the fight. After all, the more important thing now was to draw the self-healing factor card from Logan's body to prevent any unexpected changes from happening. Thinking of this, Kale did not continue to stay in the same place. His black figure flashed slightly and quickly left the rooftop, sensing the Blue Eagle's location and quickly moving towards it. 3 miles away from the small city, in the birch forest in the outskirts of the mountain ridge. Ah! The sound that sounded like a human scream and also like a beast's roar echoed through the forest, startling countless birds that had not been disturbed by the smoke of war. Under the forest where a giant eagle was hovering at low altitude, Logan kept growling in pain on the ground. The grass that he rolled over was dyed bright red. Beside him, a one-handed sword was stuck in the trunk of a tree with sticky blood stains. It was obvious that it had just been forcefully pulled out. However, the wound caused by the sodium-carbon steel sword would still suppress the self-healing factor, so the fatal wound on Logan's chest could not be healed in time. If it was a normal person, they would have died many times before the sword was pulled out of their chest. Only Logan's strong willpower could barely hold on under the condition of excessive blood loss. Swoosh, 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 a black figure quickly swept through the forest. Along the way, his military boots crushed the fallen leaves and stopped in this area. When the Blue Eagle hovering at a low altitude saw the person, it let out a joyful cry. As if it had completed its mission, it fluttered its injured wings and flew back to the blue sky where the sun shone brightly. "You're here? Where's that man?" Logan raised his head forcefully and glared at the cold young man who had arrived in front of him. He clutched his chest and struggled to get up from the grass. His strong body was drenched in sweat and blood, looking extremely tragic. "I forced him to retreat," Kale replied calmly, looking coldly at the heavily injured Logan. It could be said that there was no enmity between the two. To a certain extent they could be considered allies. However, on Logan's body, there was an important card that he wanted to draw. The law of the jungle was just like that. Kale had never been a kind person. Under the absolute desire to become stronger, even if he was given a chance to do it all over again, he would still gamble his life and fight to the death with the strong Logan for a self-healing factor ability card. Although he had principles, bottom lines, and emotions, they were only limited to those who stood on his side and did not include anyone who stood on the opposite side. Inside the birch forest, Kale's gaze swept slightly. He took a few steps forward and removed the sodium-carbon steel sword from the blood-stained tree trunk. He held it in his hand again and walked towards Logan. "Are you going to kill me here?" Logan's tone was weak and bitter. He held onto a birch tree beside him, his eyes full of unwillingness. He was unwilling to die like this. To die in front of the saber-toothed tiger. "I've never said that I wanted to kill you. But now that things have come to this point, it's too late to negotiate. Even if I don't want to kill you, I can't let you go." Kale calmly told the truth. Even if he drew all the ability cards from Logan with the current hostile relationship between the two, He could not let the tiger go back to the mountain. Then there's nothing to say. Logan smiled bitterly and nodded slightly. His empty right hand suddenly stretched out 3 sharp claws. Just when Kale thought he was going to continue to resist, the sharp claws pressed against his heart. Kale narrowed his eyes and asked calmly, "What do you want to do?" "I want to negotiate again." Logan gritted his teeth and stared intently at Kale in front of him. He took a deep breath and said, "There must be something on me that you want. This thing should also meet the conditions for me to be alive. Otherwise, you wouldn't have let the eagle save me on the rooftop just now and let that man kill me." Indeed, the rescue order he had given to the blue eagle on the rooftop just now had directly exposed this information. "I don't think you can use suicide as a bargaining chip." Kale's expression did not change, but he sighed inwardly. He really had no other choice at the time. Ability cards could only be drawn from living people. Item cards were similar to equipment drops and could be used to kill the holder of the item. "I only have this bargaining chip. How would I know if I don't try?" Logan said with difficulty. The sharp claws on his right hand reached forward a little and completely pierced the surface of his skin. The self-healing factor was still suppressed. This also caused the surface of his skin to show no signs of self-healing. Kale was silent for a moment and said in a low voice, "Wait. Tell me what you want to negotiate first." "Looks like I made the right bet." Logan let out a slight sigh of relief and said coldly, "That man just now, the saber-toothed tiger, must die. That's not a problem. I will kill him." Kale nodded in agreement. The saber-toothed tiger's current identity was an officer in the German army. When the 3 Allied armies invaded Germany, they would have to deal with him sooner or later. For now, he had to agree first and stabilize Logan before anything else. Just as Kale thought of this, Logan in front of him shook his head and said, "No. I must personally kill him. I must kill him with my own hands. You can only assist me from the side." "That's impossible," Kyle said flatly. This was going too far. "As long as this condition is met, I will do anything you want me to do in the future. Whether it's human experiments or as a killing weapon, I will directly obey." Logan finished speaking in a low voice. His sharp claws slowly went deeper into his body, almost touching the depths of his heart, as if to express his resolute attitude. The choice of negotiation was passed back to Kale. He wasn't using his own life as a negotiation condition, but his own loyalty? Kale fell silent again. This time, he was carefully weighing the conditions that Logan had proposed in his heart. The other party was a lone wolf that was forced into a desperate situation. If he could take him under his wing and firmly control him, then the faction he created in the future would have enough high-end fighting strength to hold up the fort. The only doubt he had was that the other party might betray him in the future. Kale directly opened his mouth and asked, "If I agree to your negotiation plan, then how will you prove your loyalty?" "I am willing to swear on my father's name and my mother's name, that as long as you can help me kill my enemy with my own hands, no matter what you want me to do in the future, I will do it without any hesitation." Logan finished speaking seriously and looked at Kale with anticipation. "Very good. Then we have reached a preliminary agreement. Remember what you said today." Kale shrugged and said after making a decision, "I will help you kill the saber-toothed tiger." Chapter 72. A month later. More than half of the 2 million strong army of the 3 countries attacked the French cities and cleared out the remaining German troops. While liberating most of the French territory, they continued to attack the border of Germany. This was also the most difficult line of defense to break through. The steel tanks and armored vehicle armed forces of the German army set up layers of heavy firepower defense lines in the border city area. The 3 countries that had been advancing triumphantly were heavily hit by artillery bombardment after arriving at the German defense line. Tens of thousands of vanguard troops were isolated outside the defense line. "As long as we break through this line of defense, our army will be able to enter the hinterland of Germany and even take down the enemy's capital in one fell swoop." Fry, who was leading one of the vanguard troops of the alliance, frowned. He poked his head out of the broken wall and looked half a mile away through military binoculars. The row of giant tanks that resembled a steel fortress had countless black muzzles slanted toward the area in front of them. Everyone understood the logic, but it was not that simple to break through the defense line of the enemy tanks. This was not an armed force that could be made up for by numbers. No matter how many soldiers went up, they would only be cannon fodder. Fry waved his hand and asked a frontline correspondent, "Where are our bombing planes? Why haven't they arrived yet?" The correspondent, who had just finished communicating with the rear, reported, Germany sent almost all of their planes into the air and greatly affected the bombing mission of our planes. They probably won't be able to come here in the next few days. Without planes and tanks as reinforcements, are we going to use the bodies of soldiers to break through this heavy firepower defense line? Fry gritted his teeth. When he was thinking of a solution, the face of a cold young man flashed across his mind. If he was here, he would definitely have a way to break through this line of defense. Fry sighed. Since a month ago, Cale had disappeared from the front line and no soldier had seen him again. Where did Cale go? With his strength, if he did not have something to do, he would not leave the battlefield for no reason. Fry was lost in thought when a group of soldiers suddenly exclaimed beside him. "First Lieutenant Fry, there are 2 people riding motorcycles towards the tank defense line in front of us. One of them should be Major General Cale. It's Major General Cale." The correspondent held the binoculars in one hand and patted the ground excitedly with the other. Cale. Fray's heart skipped a beat. He didn't care where he put his binoculars anymore. He snatched the binoculars from the correspondent and looked at the formation ahead. Coincidentally, at this time the German tank troops also reacted. Several tanks took the lead and aimed at the area. The sound of cannons buzzed, covering the ruins in front of them with a sea of explosions. Woo! The roaring sound of the engines was still ringing out. Under the cover of the dust and gravel from the bombardment, the 2 modified motorcycles charged out of the sea of fire and continued to advance at high speed under the tank's cannon muzzle. On one of the motorcycles, there was a young man in a black combat suit with a one-handed sword on his back. On the other motorcycle, there was a middle-aged man wearing a jacket and jeans with a cigarette in his mouth. The 2 did not look like they were risking their lives to break through the bombardment zone. It was more like a motorcycle race on a daily basis, neither of them giving way to the other. It really is Cale. I've been worried for nothing for so long. Fry put down the binoculars in his hand and muttered to himself. He stood up as if he realized something and loudly issued an order: "All soldiers in the vanguard, prepare your weapons. When Major General Cale rushes into the enemy tank defense line, immediately launch an attack forward." Bang! The cannonball dragged an extremely fast tail as it swept through the air in a straight line and hit the ground violently. Within a 3-meter radius, even the gravel was crushed into dust. Flames and shockwaves swept out. Cale rode the motorcycle with ease. His quick reactions were constantly microcontrolling the motorcycle, and he narrowly avoided the dense bombardment time and time again. The impact of the bombardment was also easily blocked by the venom suit on his body. Logan's eyes were filled with coldness and killing intent. As he rode the motorcycle, the flying shrapnel and gravel caused by the bombardment scratched his face, but there was no change in his expression at all. "Are you sure that the man is in the tank unit in front?" Logan asked in a deep voice. "Of course." Cale nodded. "To be exact," he said, "in the past month, Saber-Toothed Tiger has been very careful. He didn't show himself in the small-scale war zones where he wasn't confident. It was only this morning that Blue Eagle found out that he was hiding in the German army here, but I'm not sure which tank he's in exactly." Logan said coldly, "That's enough. I can smell the stench coming from him within a certain distance. Okay. I'll create chaos and break the defense of the tank formation. You go find him and force him out." After Cale finished speaking, he twisted the handle again. The motorcycle under him soared to the highest speed and rushed 3 meters into the air with the help of a small pit in front of him. Boom! The next moment, several cannonballs landed on the previous ground, and the shockwaves caused by the impact sent the motorcycle flying in the air. Cale stepped on the seat and jumped forward from the motorcycle. There was still a distance of more than 10 meters, but Cale quickly crossed it in a few seconds. When he landed from the air, the steel tank that was constantly firing cannonballs was already in front of him. The first one. Cale's eyes were cold. Without waiting for the tank to fire again, he stepped on the ground and jumped high. His right hand clenched into a fist and directly punched into the empty muzzle. The cannonball that was fired into the muzzle hit the end of the vibranium arm guard and instantly caused an explosion inside the tank. Accompanied by the screams of the soldiers inside and the shockwaves of the fire, the steel tank was completely turned into a pile of scrap iron. Cale pulled his right arm out of the muzzle. His shoulder was slightly injured by the cannonball, but it quickly healed under the cover of the venom suit without any damage. Self-healing factor, blue ability card. On the first day of negotiation with Logan, it had been successfully drawn. The perfect physique of the super soldier did not have any obvious increase in strength and speed. The most significant increase was in physical strength, vitality, and self-healing ability. Because of this, Kale was more confident in his extreme offensive behavior that seemed to be self-harm but was actually normal. With the self-healing factor ability card as a safety insurance, his own physique could truly be called a human weapon. Kale sped up and jumped onto the tank on the side, pulled out the sodium carbon steel sword, cut the steel connection and forcibly opened the door on the top. He smiled faintly at the few soldiers in the tank, pulled the safety pin of a high-explosive grenade that he had prepared at his waist, and threw it inside. He quickly closed the steel round door again. A subtle explosion sound came through the steel armor of the tank, and then black smoke continued to leak out from the round door and the muzzle. The second one. Chapter 73. Da-da-da. The ordinary rifle bullets that were fired from all directions were like rubber and bounced off the Venom suit without any lethality. The firepower only made Kale take half a step back and did not hurt his body at all. In fact, even if there were bullets with extremely strong penetrating power that could penetrate the tough protective layer of the Venom suit, there was still the high density and strong muscles of a super soldier inside. A sniper rifle bullet could barely penetrate into the muscles below the surface, but that was all it could do. Under the rapid healing factor, as long as the consecutive shots did not hit the same spot and directly penetrated the fatal parts of the body, it would not pose a substantial threat to one's life. The 3 layers of physical defense insurance allowed Kale to do whatever he wanted on the battlefield. The heavy firepower bombardment was too slow, and the ordinary gunfire was too weak. Pada-pada. A burst of fire from the German army stopped, and the dense metal bullets fell from Kale's Venom suit and rolled from the top of the tank to the ground around. Kale looked up indifferently and looked down at the soldiers behind the tank. Under the Venom suit, he was like a human-shaped demon standing on the tank. His extremely wild and murderous appearance of iron and blood made countless German soldiers who were changing magazines around him step back in horror. Is he a living person or an unkillable monster? It's him, the demon of the United States. He actually appeared here. It's over, it's really over, we're all going to die here. Even if the black leather hood did not reveal his face, the one-handed sword, black combat suit, the cross of death symbol, the major general rank, and the monster-level strength clearly indicated the identity of the enemy in front of them. Kale of the United States. The rumored executioner demon was really standing in front of them. Fear seemed to be contagious, and it filled the hearts of every soldier in the German army in a short time. Countless German recruits holding guns trembled and fell to the ground. This was the powerful suppression of a war hero. No matter where he went, as the main battlefield, he had an indescribable dominance. A brown-bearded German officer waved his arm among the soldiers and shouted encouragingly, "No matter who he is, hold the weapons in your hands tightly. Behind us is our homeland. We must..." Before he could finish his impassioned words, a blue laser beam swept across a distance of tens of meters and accurately landed on the officer's forehead. The laser energy burst out and vaporized the entire head into nothingness. The remaining headless corpse fell backward with blood splattering everywhere. "You're disturbing me." Kale sneered and put the energy pistol back into the holster. The high-tech weapons made by the Hydra organization have been lost since the energy manufacturing plant and have become a rare limited edition. In the US military, he was the only one who was still equipped with it, and it could be used as a means of long-range combat. After this shot, some of the German recruits had a mental breakdown and retreated. Even more German soldiers wanted to try firing again, but under the chaos of their own people, the entire orderly formation of the troops was in a mess. Kale wanted to take advantage of the chaos to get rid of the tanks first, but he saw a figure in a jacket rushing into the group of soldiers, recklessly waving the wolf-shaped claws in his hand to start a massacre. Every step he took caused several soldiers to wail and fall, accompanied by the spilling of fresh blood. "Logan." Kale looked at the figure and frowned. But soon he knew why Logan rushed into the group of German soldiers. Logan crazily tore apart the bodies of the German soldiers to open a path, messily but directionally going deep into the enemy group. When Logan rushed to the center of the army, a soldier wearing a steel helmet at the back of the German troops shrank his head and suddenly got up, revealing his tall and burly figure. He pushed aside his comrades around him with his big hands and quickly stepped back into German territory to escape. Saber-toothed tiger, it's really cunning and cautious. It has been hiding in this dense group of soldiers. Kale shook his head with a smile. It was a pity that Logan and the saber-toothed tiger had so many years of old and new hatred. Even if the saber-toothed tiger smeared a few layers of mud on its body and hid underground, Logan would still be able to find it with his sharp sense of smell. He would be able to find it even if he searched through the entire battlefield. The target has appeared. This way things will be easier. Kale smiled faintly and was not in a hurry to catch up with the two people who had a personal grudge. He jumped on top of another tank again, holding the sodium carbon steel sword in his left hand, and quickly slashed at a German soldier who poked his head out to check the situation outside. The German soldier didn't even have time to scream before his head and helmet flew high into the air. The blood that flowed down made the soldiers inside the tank scream in horror. Kale was too lazy to break into the tank. He simply threw a grenade, and the sound inside the tank quickly calmed down after the explosion. Da-da-da. The dense bullets continued to shoot ineffectually at the Venom suit, but they only slightly interfered and delayed Kale's annihilation of the tank. Kale didn't even look at the soldiers outside. Under their desperate gazes, he focused on destroying the steel tanks that were the biggest threat to the Allies. The 13th tank. Kale coldly recounted the number of the battle record. He was destroying another tank under his feet when suddenly, from behind him, there was a dense sound of military boots. Kale raised his head and looked over. In the area of ruins that was originally baptized by bombardment, a large number of Allied soldiers were constantly pouring out from half a mile away. They all rushed forward in accordance with the slogan, "Charge! Break through the Frankfurt border and take down the evil Hitler in one fell swoop." Keep up with Major General Kale's pace, victory is close at hand. For the victory of the war, for Major General Kale. Among the thousands of Allied soldiers, Kale saw a familiar black officer at a glance. His bald head was particularly eye-catching in the sun, and he was waving at him. "Fry, the Allies are really slow." Kale shook his head and commented. He had already destroyed a small part of the tank-armed group. At the same time, after seeing the Allies launch their attack at this time, he also knew that the Frankfurt defense line would not be able to resist for another 10 minutes. It was like opening a hole in a dam, and the surging flood would quickly blow up the entire dam and flood the area below the river channel. After the most powerful tank army was annihilated, the Allies were basically unimpeded and could forcefully attack the Frankfurt capital. Chapter 74. Kill. The huge commotion reverberated above the battlefield at the border of Germany. The tens of thousands of vanguard troops of the Allied army broke through the defense line of the tank forts and clashed fiercely with the already chaotic German army. It instantly became a near one-sided slaughter. Under a continuous and dense rain of bullets, the Frankfurt soldiers fell in a pool of blood one after another like harvesting wheat. Soon, the Frankfurt troops that lost their tanks retreated in defeat and began to flee into their territory. Kale? Fry quickly emerged from the charging Allied soldiers. He waved his hand and ran toward Kale, who was standing on the tank. "Fry, I'll leave this to you. I still have something to do. We'll meet in the Frankfurt capital in a few days." Kale took off his venom hood and nodded to Fry, who was a few meters away. Then he nimbly turned over and landed on the ground. He quickened his pace and joined the Allied troops that were advancing into Frankfurt territory. When Fry arrived at the tank, panting, and looked around, Kale had already disappeared in the vast sea of soldiers. "Kale, this guy, he doesn't lead troops all day long. Where did he go?" Fry sighed helplessly. However, Kale always appeared at the most critical moment of the battle and often turned the situation around in one fell swoop. That was enough. On the other hand, Kale's appearance and the halo effect of a war hero could bring huge psychological pressure to the enemy soldiers and also have a group inspiration effect on their own soldiers. This was the irreplaceable role of superheroes on a large-scale battlefield. Kale ran all the way and left the battlefield where the Allies and Frankfurt were fighting. According to the location given by the Blue Eagle in the sky, after entering Frankfurt territory, he quickly approached the mountain on the side. After a while, Kale arrived at the dense forest at the foot of the mountain. He stopped and looked around. It could be seen that the small path further up the mountain, the trees and grass were in a mess. The smooth claw marks and undried blood after the battle were everywhere, extending all the way to the top of the mountain. The faint sounds of fighting and killing coming from the mountain, accompanied by the mountain breeze, could be heard clearly. Lone wolf, saber-toothed tiger. Kale muttered to himself as he rushed up the mountain. Soon, the scene of two people fighting to the death at the top of the mountain entered his eyes. There weren't many trees growing at the top of the mountain, which was hundreds of meters high. On the other side was a cliff. Logan and the burly man stretched out their unique bony claws in the open space at the top of the mountain next to the cliff. The two of them were like wild beasts in human form. They used their strong bodies as weapons and clashed fiercely. Their sharp claws left hideous wounds that were deep to the bone on their bodies, but they quickly healed. Logan and the saber-toothed tiger both had mutated beast genes and the ability to heal themselves. Logan's fight with the saber-toothed tiger was fierce and bloody. Neither side gave in to the other and fought with all their might. Unless one of them died or escaped, this duel would not stop. After Kale arrived at the top of the mountain, Logan and the saber-toothed tiger quickly scanned the area to confirm. When Logan saw Kale, he quickly retracted his gaze in relief. His expression was still cold as he continued to fight fiercely. When the saber-toothed tiger saw Kale, his broad and wild face suddenly changed. Even his attacking movements stopped, almost letting Logan's sharp claws rip open his stomach. If it was just Logan alone, he still had 60 to 70% confidence that he could kill him. However, if the American Emperor, Kale, who was suspected to be on Logan's side, was added, then there was no chance of winning at all. The saber-toothed tiger was injured and rolled on the ground in pain. Its fierce and cold eyes were vigilant. When it saw Kale crossing his arms and standing 5 meters away from the battle as if he was watching from the side, the saber-toothed tiger was slightly relieved. What? To deal with you, Kale and I don't need to work together. Logan stared coldly at the saber-toothed tiger in front of him. His eyes were bloodshot and filled with hatred. He raised his wolf-shaped sharp claws and said, "I will kill you here with my own hands alone." You said it yourself. When the saber-toothed tiger heard that, it grinned and stood up from the ground as if nothing had happened. In just a few seconds, the claw wound on its stomach had healed. It growled and its tall and burly body pounced forward. Logan crossed his arms in front of his body to block, but he was still sent flying like a kite with a broken string. Blood splattered everywhere as he rolled on the ground a few times before coming to a stop. You think I used all my strength just now? I was just testing you. The saber-toothed tiger sneered. Without waiting for Logan to get up, it strode forward and continued to suppress him. After so many years, you still haven't learned your lesson? The saber-toothed tiger stands at the top of the natural ecological chain. It is the superior predator of you, little wolf. The saber-toothed tiger said as it grabbed Logan's collar, who had just gotten up from the ground. Logan's body was considered strong in the eyes of ordinary people, but compared with the saber-toothed tiger's nearly 2-meter-tall body, the difference was too big. The saber-toothed tiger lifted Logan with one hand and clenched the other into a fist. It kept punching Logan's abdomen with 2 sharp claws. It was a violent offensive with great power and lethality. Blood kept splattering everywhere. Logan's self-healing ability was somewhat unable to heal. Kale, who was watching from the side, saw this scene and couldn't help but shake his head. However, he had already expected this. The current Logan is not in the state of Wolverine after injecting adamantium into his body. It is indeed unrealistic to want to defeat the saber-toothed tiger alone at this time. After all, although the saber-toothed tiger gene is only blue rare quality, it just suppresses the lone wolf gene ability. The stronger beast physique and strength cannot be made up with time and skill. Logan, I still need to help you. Kale shrugged, the corners of his mouth raised slightly. During the negotiation, Logan only proposed that he must kill the saber-toothed tiger alone and not let him join the battle. However, he did not say that he could not give a little help in the battle. Venom, go help Logan. Kale patted his battle suit. Venom seemed to know what he meant. It turned into black liquid from the chest symbol and bounced to the ground, approaching the battle situation where Logan was. When Venom completely left his body, Kale was wearing a casual short-sleeved shirt and pants, which was also prepared in advance. In the battle, the saber-toothed tiger held the struggling Logan with one hand. After stopping the fist with sharp claws, it threw the seriously injured Logan to the side of the cliff. Seeing that Logan was about to be thrown over the cliff, a mass of black liquid bounced out and split into countless black liquid silks tightly wrapped around his body, forming a tough black leather battle suit. The next moment, the wings automatically stretched out from his back and Logan, wearing the battle suit, turned over in the air and glided back to the top of the mountain. Venom battle suit is fully covered. The auxiliary combat system has been activated. Chapter 75. In the battle at the edge of the cliff. Logan, who was in symbiosis with Venom, relied on his gliding ability to land lightly on the top of the mountain, retracting the wings on the back of the battle suit, and his scarlet eyes stared fiercely at the saber-toothed tiger. His symbiosis and fusion with Venom fully covered the outer appearance of the battle suit, which was very different from Kale's previous one. The particularly prominent muscle outline was not as robust and perfect as before, but it was more like a wild assembly line. Although the whole body of the battle suit was still dark black, it had a light silver beast pattern. The symbol on the chest of the battle suit changed from a death cross to an exquisite wolf head. On top of the hood, there were 2 additional wolf ears that had been transformed into a pair of wolf ears. The most obvious were the bone claws, which turned into a dark black metal texture, reflecting a faint cold light in the sun. The saber-toothed tiger's face was solemn and tense, and it raised its sharp claws vigilantly, confronting Logan, who was wearing the silver wolf battle suit. He didn't know what happened just now, only that the Logan in front of him gave him a completely different feeling. Powerful, cold, wild and ferocious, with the aggressive aura of a beast. In fact, even Logan himself didn't know what state he was in now. Just now, when Logan was thrown off the cliff, he didn't see venom attached to his body at all. He just struggled to think that he must not fall, and as a result, the back of the battle suit automatically stretched out a pair of wings and assisted and guided him to glide back to the top of the mountain. More than that, hatred, deeper and deeper, emotions, excitement filled the heart. Strength, constantly surging from inside and outside the body, the comprehensive increase from venom's symbiosis. Although I don't know what's going on in this state, I can win, Logan whispered, clenching his fists, and the black cold claws stretched to the extreme. He slowly raised his head and looked at the saber-toothed tiger in front of him. Outside the battle, Kale nodded lightly and muttered to himself, "That's right, use the power I lent you to complete the terms of the negotiation." He had successfully drawn the self-healing factor, which was his original goal. If Logan could complete his revenge and submit to him, that would be the greatest additional benefit. Without waiting for Kale to think too much, within his field of vision, Logan had already taken the initiative to fight the saber-toothed tiger in close combat. Black claws and claws collided head-on. This time, it was the saber-toothed tiger that was at a disadvantage. It did not expect Logan to not only increase his speed, but also increase his strength and the strength of his claws. The sharp claws tore a hole in its palm. "Damn it!" The saber-toothed tiger roared angrily. Its arms contracted forward in an attempt to trap Logan in front of it and drag the battle into its forte, strength. No matter what, vitality and strength were the domain specialties he was most confident in. How could Logan let the saber-toothed tiger do as it wished? He quickly lowered his body and nimbly avoided the bear hug. He swept under the shoulder of the other party's burly figure, and his sharp claws quickly added a few more claw marks on the saber-toothed tiger's waist. Blood splashed all over the ground. The saber-toothed tiger was angry and shocked. It was angry because it was the first time it had suffered losses consecutively. It was frightened because Logan's overall strength had greatly increased under venom symbiosis. Originally, it could still keep up with the speed and reaction, but under the enhancement of Logan's speed and agility, it was no longer on the same level. In the following time, Logan relied on his speed and agility, like a black wolf beast, to constantly sweep around the saber-toothed tiger. The saber-toothed tiger was completely like a human sandbag. It could not even lock its gaze on the black figure, let alone fight back. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, every time Logan swept past quickly, his sharp claws splashed blood on the saber-toothed tiger's body. The blood spilled on the ground and dyed the top of the mountain dark red. Even his mind and temperament were inclined to that of a beast. He was constantly torturing the prey's body, consuming its physical strength, destroying its spirit and further nibbling away at its life. "Ah!" The saber-toothed tiger suddenly screamed. Its face was pale as it hugged its left ear. There was a smooth cut there, obviously it had been directly cut off by the sharp claws. "This is for my father," Logan said coldly, holding a bloody ear in his left hand and throwing it directly over the cliff. "No!" The saber-toothed tiger's eyes were about to burst. It watched as one of its ears was thrown over the cliff like garbage. It roared crazily and pounced on Logan with all its might. Logan jumped on the spot and jumped 3 to 4 meters high. He stepped on the saber-toothed tiger's forehead in midair and quickly stabbed his sharp claws into the tiger's back. "This is for my mother." Bang! The saber-toothed tiger widened its eyes and was directly pressed to the ground by Logan. Logan took advantage of the situation and sat on his waist, his black claws scratching all the way up from his back to his neck. "This is for my wife," Logan growled. Blood splattered into his eyes, making them look even more demonic. The saber-toothed tiger, who could not get up, dug its tiger-shaped claws deep into the stone soil and panted heavily. Its self-healing could not keep up with the injuries it had suffered. It struggled so hard that blood and gravel splattered everywhere. "Logan, catch." At this moment, the young man's calm voice came from outside the battle. A one-handed sword was thrown over. Logan reacted quickly and caught it. The saber-toothed tiger on the ground seemed to have realized something and began to struggle violently. Its eyes were filled with fear and regret. "Logan, I was wrong. Give me a chance." The saber-toothed tiger began to beg for mercy, hoping that Logan would let it go. Logan sneered. His sharp claws dug into the saber-toothed tiger's spine and fixed its body to the ground. He then slowly raised the one-handed sword in his other hand. "This is for my son." "No." The saber-toothed tiger roared, but its voice quickly stopped. The sodium-carbon steel sword pierced through its neck and nailed it to the ground. All the enmity between them had come to an end. Seeing the saber-toothed tiger's body lose its vitality, Kale, who had been watching from the side, took a few steps forward. The silver wolf battle suit on Logan's body became restless and turned back into countless liquid black lines. They bounced back and wrapped around Kale's body. Logan, who had lost his battle suit and returned to his original appearance, sat on the saber-toothed tiger's body. He was in a trance and leaned back slightly on the blood-stained ground. "Behave yourself," Kale said softly. The target of this sentence was not Logan, but Venom, who had turned back into a black battle suit. Venom's symbiosis had absorbed and replicated part of Logan's hatred, resentment, speed, and strength. Now it was still a little restless and wanted to vent it on the battlefield. If Kale was not Venom's founder, mother, first-generation symbiosis and master, he really couldn't suppress Venom's murderous nature. "Got it? Did you unlock a new ability?" Kale thoughtfully stretched out his hands. After clenching his fists, 3 dark claws quickly stretched out, flashing with a cold light. Chapter 76. Not bad. Kale nodded and whispered, retracting the dark claws on his hands. In this way, the Venom suit can also be removed from the awkward situation of having only a bulletproof outer layer, gliding, camouflage, night stealth and other auxiliary functions, but not the slightest bit of offensive mode. After appeasing the symbiotic Venom, Kale turned his gaze back to Logan lying on the ground and asked, "How do you feel after completing your revenge?" Logan stared blankly at the blue sky, his chest still unable to calm down. He gasped and said, "The stone that has been pressing on my heart for so long can now be removed. I feel very comfortable and at ease. I feel that even if I die here now, it doesn't matter." Lone Wolf finally no longer has to carry a heart full of hatred and resentment, constantly searching the world alone, all the way down with scars. Kale smiled and said, "That won't do. According to the negotiation, now that your conditions have been met, whether you live or die and how you live in the future, it is up to me to decide. If you die here, then I will lose out." "That's true." Logan, on the other hand, smiled in a carefree and relaxed manner. He propped himself up from the ground and looked at Kyle in the eye as he said sincerely, "Although this is only a condition for negotiation, I still have to thank you. Otherwise, I don't know how many years it will take for me to achieve this revenge." Kale smiled and said, "If you really want to thank me, then according to the conditions and agreement, give me all your loyalty in life." Logan nodded. He clenched his fists and said firmly, "I will do it." "That's good." Kale patted Logan on the shoulder and was also happy from the bottom of his heart. The #1 fighter of the unestablished family was officially in place. As the saying goes, don't doubt the person you use, don't use the person you doubt. As long as Logan dared to swear loyalty, then Kale dared to arrange for him to be used with confidence. This was his confidence and courage. As long as he didn't stop becoming stronger, he would always have the suppressive effect of the family leader. At the same time, in the future, when the family's power grew, many subordinates would do their best to keep each other in check. Then, there would be no need to fear that there would be a day when someone would betray the family. "When we return to the American base, I will find someone to arrange an American identity for you. I will also modify your documents. Are you still called Logan?" Kale said after some thought. With his current status and connections, even if he followed the normal procedures, it wouldn't be a problem to arrange an American ID for someone. However, considering that he would be building a private family force in the future, he shouldn't do too many things as a major general of the country to avoid other incidents in the future. "My name will be Logan. As for my surname..." Logan hesitated for a moment before making a decision. "It's up to you." It wasn't impossible to forcefully use one's original name, but the effect of concealing one's identity would basically be lost. Furthermore, he had killed the saber-toothed tiger today and put an end to the hatred from the first half of his life. It was also time to abandon the tragic and lonely past and move towards the true future of life. Kale seemed to have understood Logan's meaning. He nodded and said, "I understand. Then let's go." "Where to now?" Logan asked. After killing the enemy that he had fought his entire life with, he seemed to be free and at ease. His face wasn't as cold as it had been before. "The capital of Frankfurt. It's time to put an end to the chaos of the war in the European theater." Kyle shrugged. He took the sodium carbon steel sword from the saber-toothed tiger's corpse and put it back into the sheath on his back. He then quickly dived down the mountain and left. Logan paused and took one last look at the saber-toothed tiger's corpse. Dark red blood was still flowing out from the neck that had been pierced through. The eyes on the saber-toothed tiger's ferocious face were still wide open, as if it couldn't believe that it had died so easily here. Logan lightly shook his head and immediately sped down the mountain, following after Kale, who had gone ahead. The two of them, one in front and one behind, quickly left the wilderness deep in the mountains within the Frankfurt border. Half an hour later, the carnivorous beasts on the mountain finally dared to show themselves. Their ferocious fangs dripped with saliva as they tentatively surged toward the bloody corpses on the mountain top. Kale brought Logan and met up with the American troops he was in. Their morale was high as they continued to break through the Frankfurt army's defense line. They attacked the interior of Frankfurt almost unimpeded. The millions of Allied troops were like an indestructible sword. The five-star general, General Chester, was the one holding the sword at the back. Kale was the sharpest point of the sword, forcibly tearing apart the meaningless defense line. Countless Frankfurt soldiers guarding the front line chose to give up resistance and flee when they saw the demon-like youth at the forefront of the enemy. Some Frankfurt officers even saw the situation clearly. After Kale led the troops into their territory, they immediately raised the white flag and surrendered. The war in World War II had been going on for too long and too torturous. Although Hitler was still struggling to hold on, many Frankfurt soldiers and citizens were already exhausted. At this time, coupled with the powerful expedition brought by Kale and the Allied troops, they were basically powerless to stop it. It was far beyond the imagination of the historians in his previous life. In the current Marvel's Earth, a large-scale attack on an enemy country. In less than a month, hundreds of thousands of Allied troops directly attacked the capital of Frankfurt, Berlin. Berlin was like an empty city. The smell of gunpowder and blood could be smelled in the air. The previously bustling city streets were now silent. Major General Kale. Another 500 meters or so in front of us is the main city area of Frankfurt. It is basically Frankfurt's last life-saving barrier to crush Hitler. The Soviet communication soldier respectfully saluted, spoke fluent English, and reported to the young man in the battle uniform sitting on the top of the armored vehicle leading the way. Yes, the Soviet Union, the Allied forces of the three nations. Except for the American troops, after fighting side by side with Kale, the rest of the Allied troops had a deep understanding of the series of problems in the American war report that their commanding officers couldn't understand after intense discussions. Why did the American war on the European front line succeed so quickly and repeatedly achieve cases of small and large-scale battles with fewer troops? Why was the Hydra organization, which had unlimited energy weapons and threatened to affect Europe and the world, eradicated so quickly? Why was a young man in his 20s holding the rank of Major General and the symbol of the American Empire's conquest and power? The Soviet and British military forces were completely enlightened after experiencing this war with the Allied forces. It turned out that there were only two forms of war in the world: the army. One was called the army with Kale, the other was called the army without Kale. Your tanks and armored troops can't take a step forward with high firepower? We have Kale. Your tens of thousands of armed soldiers occupy the best defensive fortress line? We have Kale. Your elite Secret Service team's sneak attack is impossible to guard against? We have Kale. Chapter 77. Kale of the United States. War hero, the youngest Major General, the symbol of the country's conquest and strength, worthy of his name. These were the thoughts and conclusions of most of the Allied forces of other countries. This also led to the scouts and correspondents of the Allied forces reporting to him according to procedure when they invaded Germany's territory and carried out the attack deep into the hinterland, even though the returning Kyle didn't request to take over the command of the vanguard forces. Are we finally in Berlin? It's a few days later than expected. Kale said as he jumped off the roof of the armored vehicle and stretched his hands a little. Fry opened the door of the armored vehicle and reminded him with a tense face, "We're entering the main city of the German capital. There should be the last armed army of Berlin stationed behind the bunkers of the buildings hundreds of meters ahead. Do you want me to go over and patrol?" Logan, who was wearing an American military uniform, said calmly. No, I'll go and take a look alone. Kale shrugged and did not wait for the others to respond. He immediately left the tens of thousands of vanguard soldiers alone and walked to the empty and spacious streets. The Blue Eagle patrolled and hovered at an altitude of thousands of meters. If there was a bomber or something in the air control range, it would give a warning immediately. With his strength and life-saving ability, the exhausted Germany had no means to pose a threat unless Germany had the idea of mutual destruction and threw a nuclear bomb into the center of their capital. This was unrealistic in any sense, not to mention intelligence reports that when the Hydra organization fell out with Nash, they stole more than half of the nuclear bomb data from the German research lab. As a result, Germany had not yet developed a nuclear weapon that could affect the World War situation. The United States, on the other hand, harvested the nuclear bomb data in the last underground base of the Hydra organization in the Albies Mountains. Instead, it was estimated that they were about to develop a finished nuclear weapon in their own country. This was also what Howard revealed to him when he was at the base. As a top scientist in scientific strategy who cooperated with the national military, Howard was one of the core members involved in the construction of nuclear weapons. Putting aside the fear of nuclear weapons, Kale was nearly 100 meters away from the Allies and was still approaching the main city of Berlin. His pace was neither fast nor slow. It didn't seem like he was scouting, but more like he was strolling on the streets of the city. After another 300 meters this time, Kale's super keen senses seemed to have sensed something. When he was about to pass the street intersection, he quietly turned the Venom suit into full coverage mode, and his body was ready to fight at any time. Ta-ta. The moment he crossed the intersection, Kale's footsteps came to an abrupt halt as he stood tall and straight at the intersection. Swish, swish, swish. Numerous sounds of guns being raised could be heard from both sides of the intersection. Countless rifle muzzles were aimed at Kale, who was standing at the intersection. An ambush? Kale muttered as he looked around coldly. Surrounded by thousands of armed German soldiers, he slowly grasped the carbon-sodium steel sword on his back with his left hand. Sword against spear, one against thousands. It seemed funny, but the German soldier couldn't bring himself to laugh. Even his hands were trembling slightly as sweat soaked the lining of his combat uniform. Only God knew what kind of war demons they were facing. Don't shoot. Put them down first. In the stifling atmosphere of silence, a mature and hoarse voice suddenly sounded, causing thousands of German soldiers to put down their rifles. Kale looked over in surprise and saw a middle-aged officer wearing an honorary epaulet and a general-class military uniform. He was obviously the commander of this German army as he quickly walked forward from the back of the defending troops. "Excuse me, are you Kale of the United States?" The middle-aged officer asked with a slightly unstandard English pronunciation. There was no need for him to answer, right? Kale looked at him coldly and took a few steps forward with the sword in his hand. The many German soldiers on the side subconsciously raised their muzzles and aimed again. "I said put down your weapons." The middle-aged officer roared angrily and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. He said bitterly, "Enough, everything is over." The middle-aged officer looked at Kale, who was fully covered by the combat uniform, took a deep breath and said, "My name is Dietrich Paulus, the Marshal of the German military. Here, on behalf of the entire army, I choose to surrender." The German marshal breathed a sigh of relief after he said the sullen and helpless words of surrender. He continued to give orders with a tired and dispirited expression. "All soldiers, put down all the guns and weapons in your hands and stand by." The moment his words left his mouth, the scene fell into dead silence. Thousands of German soldiers looked at each other. After one of the soldiers threw down the rifle in his hand, the rest of the soldiers also threw their weapons and cartridges on the ground one after another. It was a spectacular scene for a moment. They had long lost the will to fight. They were just the last straw that broke the camel's back. Kale knew this in his heart, so he was not surprised. He put his hand behind his back and put away the sodium carbon steel sword in his hand. It would be up to Commander Chester, who was at the back, to decide whether to accept the captives. After all, he had no desire to attack the soldiers who had completely lost their will to fight. Kale ignored the German soldiers and led the German marshal directly back to the direction of the Allied troops. Germany's last resistance army won without a fight. This also signaled the early end of this large-scale battle. After the Allied troops detained the German marshal and left troops to guard the thousands of captives, more vanguard troops continued to enter the main city of Berlin. An hour later, the German capital, Berlin, was completely occupied by the Allied troops. Half an hour earlier, after learning that the marshal led the last of the German armed troops to surrender, Hitler committed suicide in the president's office. He ordered the soldiers to burn his body on the spot. The death of the leader who started World War II, Hitler, also indirectly announced Germany's total defeat. The vanguard troops of the Allied troops began to arrange for people to be stationed in Berlin, deal with the captives, contact the rear, and other busy matters. When Fry reacted quickly and arranged for soldiers to arrest the scientists in the research institute, he realized that Kale and Logan had long disappeared. At the same time, in the secret basement of the German capital, the iron door of the military pants was forcefully broken open by a pair of dark claws. Two black shadows entered through the gap and found the main switch. The lights were turned on, and the huge basement of the military arsenal was instantly lit up. That German marshal really didn't lie. Kale retracted his claws and looked at the military arsenal in front of him that still had more than half of the supplies left. He smiled knowingly. "There's so much. The two of us can't take much," Logan said from the side. "You just guard the door. I alone am enough." Kale smiled mysteriously and walked toward the supplies wrapped in green cloth. Chapter 78. As Germany's secret underground military warehouse, its location was naturally hidden. It was not known by normal German soldiers or even low-ranking officers. Other than arranging matters after the battle, the vanguard of the Alliance army would first target the weapon blueprints, high-tech products, and elite scientists in the German research lab. As for the military supplies, they would wait for the logistics personnel to arrive before they would use the transport aircraft to search and transport them away. That was why until now, there were no signs of soldiers searching the underground military warehouse. This was also an advantage. Kale was the first to learn the location of the biggest secret military warehouse from the surrendered German marshal. Letting Logan guard the entrance of the military warehouse, Kale arrived in front of the large pile of supplies. He had no intention of removing the green cloth to check. There was no need for that. Within a 3-meter radius, even if the supplies were locked in layers of iron boxes, the information of the item cards would quickly appear. German rifle, Mauser 98K, Mauser pistol. These military supplies were of varying quality. There were quite a lot of them, but they were all common German soldier equipment. After more than a month of large-scale battles, Kale still had nearly 1,000 German weapons stored in his card space. After killing the soldiers and drawing the spoils of war, Kale's card space still stored nearly 1,000 German weapons. Green item card. It takes 1 second to draw one. Kale did not stop walking. He directly skipped over the mountains of weapons and equipment and walked to another pile of supplies on the side. Before, he had no choice. Now that he had a choice, he naturally wanted to draw the more valuable items. Camouflage raincoat, sergeant field uniform, squad machine gun. After checking a few piles of supplies near the main entrance, Kale was slightly disappointed. They were basically all white and green quality military supplies and equipment. Camouflage helmet, German-made steel military helmet. Green item card. It's green and it's a helmet. What's going on? Kale shook his head and went deeper into the military warehouse. This time, when he walked to a pile of supplies, many item cards with the word gold appeared. He was completely stunned. Gold bar. German-made gold bar, rectangular shape, 25 kilograms. Rare green item card. Golden brick. Kale's pupils contracted because not only in front of him, but also in a 3-meter radius around him, there was a 4-meter-high wall of materials, all of which contained the information of such item cards. He quickly moved to confirm the situation. There were a few piles of materials around the armory, and he was surprised to find that they were all made of gold and were worth a lot. Gold ring, jade gem, gold diamond chain, many similar rare green item cards were stacked together. At a glance, it was impossible to tell how many there were. Armory? Isn't that Germany's national treasury? Kale was a little dumbfounded. He had never seen so many gold and gems before. He was still in a dreamy state. Now he understood that the weapons and supplies he had placed at the entrance of the secret underground armory were basically a ruse. What Hitler really wanted to hide was the priceless treasure trove behind the military supplies. These are all mine. Kale took a deep breath and suppressed the excitement in his heart. With a slight thought, he began to extract the surrounding materials one by one. He began to draw the cards. If he secretly used the military to transport the fighter jets and used his power to move the inventory away, there would be a risk of being investigated. If he directly drew the cards and took them away, no matter how the other countries investigated in the future, it would be difficult for them to link this matter to Kale. Nearly 2 hours later, Kale drew the last gold ring into a card and put it into the card space. He continued to draw cards continuously until he finally stopped. The feeling of being rich is not bad. Kyle smacked his lips. Previously he had bought 40% of Stark Industries shares. He could be said to be rich and not short of money. After today he could really be said to be as rich as a country. Let's see who dares to say that they are richer than me in the future. Right, the Black Panther King of Wakanda can. Suddenly, a commotion came from the main entrance, pulling Kyle, who was in the underground armory, back to reality. Kale looked back and saw Logan quickly rushing into the interior of the military warehouse. He reminded him, "There is a group of Soviet reconnaissance soldiers approaching here. They are about 60 meters away. Their reaction is really fast. Looks like the spoils of war in the research lab have been divided up." Kale thought for a while and said to Logan, "Let's leave before they find this place. Prepare high-explosive grenades and immediately blow up the underground military warehouse before we leave. Clean up any traces of our presence." "Okay," Logan listened and nodded. After Kale finished his arrangements, he looked left and right at the empty back half of the military warehouse. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly thought of something and abruptly stopped in his tracks. He turned back and looked at the end of the underground military warehouse. A doubt appeared in his mind. The German military liked to build secret basement levels. This was an underground military warehouse that was almost like a national treasury. How could there be no secret basement? 5 minutes later, the Soviet reconnaissance team was groping their way to the front door of the underground military warehouse. Suddenly there was a strong explosion. The front door and the surrounding stone and soil layer were destroyed and collapsed, covering the entrance of the largest military warehouse. At the same time, inside the underground armory, a dark room next door lit up with the light of day again. Logan held a military-style flashlight and used the beam of light to drive away the darkness. After confirming that it was safe, he walked in front. His empty hand stretched out a wolf-shaped claw and kept opening the lid of the wooden boxes stored along the way in the dark room, revealing the contents of the boxes under the light. These are. Walking behind Logan, Kale's eyes widened in surprise as he looked at the items stored in the wooden boxes in the dark room. 12 sunflowers in a vase. One of the famous paintings by Van Gogh. Blue item card. The Last Supper. One of the famous paintings by Leonardo da Vinci. Blue item card. Venus. A famous sculpture by Michelangelo. Blue item card. Heart of the Ocean. A heart-shaped gemstone necklace made by the world's top craftsman with a rare and pure giant sapphire. Blue item card. Looks like these are the world's top treasures that Germany plundered during World War II. Kale thought to himself. No wonder even the gold and gemstones could only be stored in the military warehouse outside. It turned out that the things in the dark room were more valuable. Every one of these treasures would be world-class treasures that could cause a sensation and be auctioned off at a sky-high price in the future. Click. Logan walked to the end of the dark room and opened the last 2 big boxes with his claw. The square items in the sealed boxes suddenly glowed blue and lit up the entire dark room. You're tuning into the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.